twice each day and to jump into these headlines with this fantastic gathering of brilliant folks. Brilliant and beautiful, if I might say. I'm a little biased, but we do have the most intelligent and the most beautiful speaker stage in all of Clubhouse. And you tell me if I'm wrong. Go ahead and DM me if there's anyone that you find particularly unfitting on stage.
Tyler, are you starting a matchmaking service on the side?
Welcome to Shoot Your Shot Geek Edition. Yes.
Shoot your shot around the world.
Shoot your shot geek style.
I think that's actually, you never know. You never know.
We got Cam. Cam wants to jump up on stage. Let's see who he wants to shoot his shot with. Go ahead. Welcome, Cam.
I just want to say, yesterday I got a chance to, for the first time, talk to Florina one-on-one, and
oh boy,
what she's doing is amazing.
Wow, sounds like a good first date. When is there a follow-up scheduled already?
No, we just had a lot of common. I mean, the thing is, I've seen her for past couple of times in this room, but she always talk about things that wasn't related to the area that I'm also working. So it's good to find friends from tech news. So.
Yeah, but don't forget our 10% commission policy if something comes out of that.
What did he just say that he had a date?
No, here? It was a Clubhouse one-on-one room, I'm assuming, which that is part of our terms of service. Anything that happens in those rooms is intellectual property.
You pay us.
Yeah, that there is a 10% commission. And for anyone who might be joining for the first time, we'll do a room reset in a minute. But in case you're raising your hands, you should know that all of us on stage, yes, everyone on stage, and welcome back, Sal. It's been too long. We all know each other very well, and we've been meeting once a day and often twice a day for many, many weeks. So that's why you'll notice an unusual amount of camaraderie and familiarity with each other on stage here. And so and welcome Kai, just jumped up on stage. Welcome back, my friend. And so that might be confusing to new folks, but it's a much joy to those of us who like to get together and dissect the news each day. But if you're new, you'll notice, there's a couple of ground rules if you do come up on stage. Already there's 4 guys raising their hands, now 5, and we're waiting for more women to jump up on stage before we let more guys up on stage. It's not that we don't want to hear your lovely male voices. And then if you do come on stage, one of the policies is if you hear a woman speaking, yield the floor, because it's a ladies first policy. And then other than that, if we don't do much self-promotion, but if you're interested in self-promotion, boy, do we have a deal for you today. For just 1 Bitcoin, you can pitch the entire audience until we all fall asleep for just 1 Bitcoin. And that goes to an incredibly good cause. So do go ahead and raise your hand if you want to do the 1 Bitcoin self-promotion. And we will put that into the Tech News Around the World Champagne Fund, where we'll have a fantastic gathering at some point, a physical tech meetup where once we get to, 5-10 Bitcoin, we can fly everybody in and have quite a fest. So let's jump into the headlines, shall we? There's, as I said, the last session was fantastic. And if you have something to share, rather than DMing me, as a lot of people are prone to doing, do put it on Twitter, on your Twitter account, tweet it, and put at TNATW as part of the tweet. That's Tech News Around the World. That's our Twitter account. And please do follow the Twitter account, TNATW. But again, rather than DMing the Twitter account, just retweet the tweet you want us to see, put TNATW, and then it makes it really easy for me to retweet you so that I can share it with the whole audience. You see how that works? It's kind of genius. It's a win-win-win, because when you tweet it with the at TNATW, then the people that follow you are like, what the hell's TNATW? And maybe they click on it and learn about what we're doing. But even better, if it's a really good article, I retweet you to our audience, and it's a win-win. We all benefit. So that's the new strategy as of now. And
Tyler,
yes,
quick note. Joel is in the audience.
okay. Can he raise his hand? Joel, are you there? Raise your hand if you're there, because the audience is getting a bit large and it's tricky to find you in the crowd there. But if you raise your hand, it makes it really easy. And it's a little hand icon in the bottom right corner of the screen, if I remember correctly. So let me know if Cal, if you can keep an eye on that and invite him up when you see it.
I can't pull people up right
you
now.
can now. Boom, easy fix. There you go. So I can multitask while we do that. So we in the last session we jumped into a bunch of really hot topics like the dark side. Hackers on the pipeline, which we'll see in a minute if there's an update on that, and WhatsApp data privacy policies, and eBay doing NFTs, and boy, it got interesting. And this will likely be no exception, as the American time zone, as we call this one, often brings out the heat, brings out the fire. And folks, there's something about the American audience that never fails to entertain. So already a couple folks doing some tweets. Appreciate that. And following the Tech News Twitter account, which is another fantastic reason to follow the Tech News Around the World Twitter account, is because, as you know, Twitter has their own Clubhouse-like feature that they call Twitter Spaces. And the Tech News Around the World Twitter account can create Twitter Spaces, and we try it from time to time as they continue to improve it. And we do that, we meet here in Clubhouse Monday to Friday, twice a day, 10 times a week, and usually on Saturdays. And so we test the Twitter account on the weekends just to see how they're doing in terms of progress over there, just to kick the tires a little bit. And so if you want to see what Tech News Around the World is like in Twitter Spaces, then of course you'll need to follow the account, the Tech News TNATW account. So that's another great reason to follow it. But so here we go into some headlines. Before I do, of course, we're going to get into political tech and fintech and China tech and green tech, Africa, India, AI, and etc. But today is a special day because we're going to touch on ed tech. And did we bring up Joel? There he is, Joel Hellerman. There, look at that handsome devil there. Let me get Joel up on stage here. Welcome to Tech News Around the World, Joel.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here in this cyber virtual conference space. I think last time we were together, it was on a physical stage of some kind. And how are things going? And thanks to Aurora for reconnecting us. I know I assume you've been incredibly busy because I've seen the fundraising announcements, and you're raising some really good doing some very good fundraising from some very good investors. So I imagine you're making some very good progress, or as evidenced by the fact that they continue to give you more of their smart money. So if you would, could you start by giving us a little update on how things are going?
For sure. So last year was quite busy. Around this time last year, we were working quite extensively with the hospitals. So we ended up working with over 2,000 hospitals, training over 80,000 health workers. So there's been a lot of work in upskilling for the healthcare segment. But then of course, all companies kind of made the transition to online upskilling and reskilling, and we benefited from that and ended up raising our Series A in December.
Yeah, and I guess can you start at the beginnings of the origins of the concept, because what you're describing is a unique use case that you kind of addressed due to COVID, right?
Exactly. So essentially, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were looking at ways in which we thought we could support through learning, and we were having conversations with the New York Academy of Sciences that were doing some work in this field. And one of the key pain points hospitals was onboarding new health workers, as well as upskilling existing ones. For example, non-ICU nurses who were supporting in the ICU facilities. And in this change, every single learner started at a different level. Some already knew 60% of the knowledge they needed for mechanical ventilators. Others were brand new volunteers. So what we were able to do with our AI-assisted learning platform was effectively personalize the experience based on exactly what they knew, exactly what they struggled with, and then make sure that they could onboard and upskill health workers more effectively. And it was amazing seeing there. We started this initiative, and then 1 week later went live together with Karolinska Institutet in Sweden and Mount Sinai in New York. And then we could just see as numbers went from 100 nurses that were training with us to 200, and ultimately leading to over 80,000 health workers getting upskilled.
That's super cool. But AI assisted learning platform, as you just described yourself, why is it that they're tell us why are you able to get such impressive? Karolinska is the prestigious medical university. How is it that you're able to get such fantastic partners to work with? And this is the best softball question of all time, but I'm I'm essentially teeing you up to give us a little more a look behind what exactly it is that you're able to do for them.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the core challenge they're then having is how can they adapt the learning delivery to each individual's knowledge gaps, how each person learns, how they forget, and so on. And the challenge with this is that you both have the complexity of the human brain. We have to understand your brain, Tyler, and how you learn and what you already know. But we also have to understand the content and the dependencies. If you know one thing, how does that relate to knowing another thing? So based on everything we know about how you learn and everything we know about the content, we can then provide a completely personalized one-to-one tutoring that then serves you up with exactly the content that you need. So if you take one example, you're a nurse working at Mount Sinai, you're a non-ICU nurse, and you're going to join the ICU team. Sana starts off by measuring exactly what you know through an assessment, maps out your skill gaps, then provides you learning in addressing your skill gaps, models how you forget to nudge you at the optimal intervals, and so on. So in the platform, you can create these courses that are completely dynamic based on what every learner needs. Essentially, the challenge is like, how can we get as close to neural link as possible, or matrix, if you will, without injecting any nodes into your brain.
Yeah. And how to optimize learning on a personal basis as well, right? I mean, that's sort of the secret sauce as well, yeah?
Exactly.
Like everyone learns differently and uniquely. And that's an interesting challenge that if you do crack the code on that, and it seems like you're making good progress, that you accelerate learning tremendously. And to me, the really exciting thing of what you're doing is that if you can cut down, I mean, there's just this strange system that the American education system and in some sense the global education system of sitting in classes of 30 people, all forcing them to learn at the same rate, when in fact we learn very differently. And if we could learn at our own rates, the same way that we play video games at our own rates, we could excel in education the same way people excel in video games, essentially.
Exactly. So what we've found is that we can help people master the material in half the time and remember it 3 times longer while staying much more engaged.
Are those real? Are you just talking out of your ass, or are those real statistics?
No, so that's, for example, one study we did with a university where we did an A/B test. Some received the kind of traditional learning delivery and some with Sana. And then based on that, they measured the learning efficacy of the platform, which makes sense, right? there's the most I think interesting story or study that to a large extent inspired the founding of the company was Benjamin Bloom in the 80s proved that students that received personalized learning performed 2 standard deviations better, meaning that they would always perform in the top 2% of the class, which is really incredible. So the challenge has just been, how can we provide personalized learning at scale? How could we essentially mimic the experience of having a one-to-one tutor for every single learner globally? And that's what I think AI is enabling today.
So the fact that people have gone remote due to COVID is in a way actually sort of a benefit to you, because it breaks the idea that we need to be sitting in physical rooms together learning in the quote unquote traditional physical way, and learning, doing things through a screen is the baby step to getting people to learning more independently and working through Zoom. You follow where I'm saying?
Exactly. So that's what we saw throughout last year, is the shift from around 80% classroom trainings and 20% self-study essentially being completely flipped. So 80% studying with an adaptive tutoring system that would adapt to your individual needs. And then once you come into the classroom based, you already have all of the conceptual understanding, and you can focus that on more application and creative discussions.
So, what is the main stat again? You learn at in half the time and 3x the retention, or what was it?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, apparently I absorbed that pretty quickly. I'm one of those fast learners. I guess you could put me in the advanced program part of the app. But
clearly genius.
Yes. When I think of this, I genuinely get goosebumps, excited about saving people endless hours of times as they go from kindergarten through university, right? I mean, you're saving some people years of time, right? And that's tremendous. And but when you think of this, as one of the co-founders, I believe, and CEO, or what gets you personally excited about this?
Tal, can I ask a quick question, because I'm a little lost? Just a quick one. Without the plugin, if you remember the scene from Matrix where the guy goes, "I'd like to learn jujitsu or kung fu," and they plug his head with this thing going in from the back. Are we similarly talking to something like that, but in a Neuralinks form, where, I mean, much, much, much earlier than, of course, in that speed of time, but this would enhance a person's ability to pick up a subject? Is that what we're talking about here in terms of narrative?
No, it was a bit of a joke. we're not doing. It's not a hardware play.
Oh, okay. So could you just define the narrative a little bit? Because I'm completely confused. We went from healthcare we went to children, we went to Neuralink, and then we fastened the speed of learning. Just in terms of narrative, how would you explain it, Joel, in 2 sentences for me, to the likes of me, the ignorant?
An online learning platform that uses AI to help you learn faster by personalizing the experience.
Tailorized learning based on what you already know, how fast you're absorbing certain elements. And it optimizes based on by noticing how quickly you're picking up certain aspects, and it adjusts in real time accordingly. Almost like if you had a really brilliant personal educator who understood you deeply as an AI and was teaching you a particular subject, and that human brilliant educator who understood you quite well through some magic AI techniques could really optimize the next piece, the pieces of the puzzle, and could introduce the pieces in the most optimum way for you to put the puzzle together.
Joel, it's MA, the one with the eyes above Dave. So to understand correctly what your software is ultimately doing from an AI perspective, for example, when you take a Microsoft exam for a certification, it actually has a quantitative easing aspect to it. Like, depending on the complexity of the problem you solve first, it will feed you with the next 3 or 5 questions that will align to that complexity. Is that what you're saying, that you're using AI to sort of align with the person who's being educated, and then as they learn, if they learn something really well, you take them faster down that road. If they don't learn as well, you slow them down. Is that what I'm understanding that the educational platform could do?
That's exactly right. So modeling what you know, how quickly you pick up on things, and adjusting the difficulty and the content accordingly. And why, like, I think this is specifically now, Tyler, you mentioned the example of the school system, but also we're facing the challenge of
upscaling. Yeah, huge,
upskilling our global
huge,
workforce.
huge, 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 huge. That is so
because
huge.
it's too unique.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So how do you? Sorry.
I'm just saying the upskilling part is, there's companies now in Silicon Valley, before it started disintegrating due to COVID, but one of the really hot areas was upskilling, because this is tremendously needed by all of the big companies, is taking their existing staff who are doing the more entry level positions, and rather than trying to spend a lot of money on recruitment and constantly hiring a new talent, they already have folks who are loyal to the company that have been working there for a few years, and they want to upskill them, but they need the right tools to upskill them. But if they can become upskilled into higher positions within the company, they become far more valuable, and it's a win-win for everybody involved. The question is, what is the right tool for doing that? And that's where, and if you develop the right tool for doing that, my God, you're talking about one of the biggest companies to come along in many years.
So Tyler, I don't know if you remember Elon Musk. He started this school called Astra for his children.
Yeah.
So what happened is there's a couple of guys who left that, and yesterday or a few days ago, there's a company called Synthesis. I don't know if sorry, I just joined. I don't know who's the founder. Is it Pierre?
Joel.
Who's the founder?
Oh, you mean the founder of Synthesis? I don't know.
No. Sorry, who were you speaking to?
No,
Joel. Sorry, I'm just joined. So
Joel.
I don't know if you're
Yeah.
Joel, sorry. So the Synthesis. So yesterday they raised $5 million for the school. Particularly, is from taking a lot of the philosophy from Ad Astra. I think there is this massive movement going on, and I don't know if you guys follow this guy called Pomp. There's a Pomp letter. This guy sends out, and I think he led that. That 5 million round, and there seems to be a lot of people are jumping on this. Again, it's again coming back to this thing about if you look at education as a wall, brick by brick, I think you want to make sure that each brick is understood before you move on to the next brick, right? So they kind of bringing that concept into this. It's built from this Elon Musk building that Ad Astra based on that concept, the first principle thinking.
There's also a private school, Davidson Academy, that has been doing this for a while. Not the AI portion, but teaching kids, as individuals, and where they would probably in the past seem like they aren't able to learn. Maybe they just learn better through music, like learning math through music or different means like that. And we talked about this in the mathematician room about how there's so many different ways to solve problems. You just need to learn what somebody already knows, and then tailor that to how they can solve this problem. And they'll be able to do it in different, faster ways. The whole challenge is, like we were talking about, scaling. I was wondering how the system is set up through AI. Is it that you're recognizing different cohorts, and then you can have a large, a collection of cohorts that are repetitive, like that you can put people in those classes and then automatically know the trajectory, or is it all unique, almost like a fingerprint, which would be harder to scale?
So let me give an example of something that we experimented at Imperial College. It's called the Imperial Lab. So it's coding. Coding kids has been a big thing for the last, especially around UK government, because 60% of the future jobs are in UK people don't have the skill. So there was this massive initiative around coding kids. So one of the things that they were building and using AI is that. So just to come back to your point, Brandon, is that how it would work is that So the machine will adapt. So let's say you are trying to solve a particular coding a particular problem, and when you struggle, what it will do is it will just go into deeper. It will throw in until you understand that particular brick, right, before you move on to the next task. So what happened is that school grown from 100 people. Now we have like 3,000 kids attending. I mean, now because of COVID, it hasn't. But before COVID, there was about 3,000 kids turning up, because you can see the difference. It's pretty much what it is. It's personalized, even though behind you don't feel like it's being personalized. So when you struggle, what it'll do is it will learn quickly where you're struggling, and it will make sure that it kind of targets, or gives you based on your, how you solved the previous task. It throws in puzzles, and then it makes you feel as though you actually solved it. It's such a beautiful, so it is still testing in process, but I think there is a lot of, progress in this space. I think that's what I think that these guys are Sanalab is working on. I'm assuming working on brick by brick, before we're moving on to the next break.
Well, let's find out. Joel.
Yeah, Joel. Have you
Over
figured
to
it
you,
out?
Joel.
That's exactly right, and one of the key challenges in this is you don't want to manually specify like if this then that for every single possible misconception or
Right.
knowledge gap, but you want to be able to model it automatically by analyzing the content, analyzing the learner, and that's what we're able to do today, where we can find, like, if you answer 3 questions incorrectly in a specific area, we can look at what was the content of that question, which incorrect answer did you choose, and then based on this, provide you with the exact explanation that will address your knowledge gap, and do that dynamically without the author having to specify it. And that enables us to scale personalization, where it doesn't become more difficult to produce this content because the modeling is done in the background.
I have a question, Joe. How this fits in our organized education that we have from elementary to K-12 at school? Thank you.
We're seeing two big use cases of adaptive learning technologies are math and reading literacy. So imagine you're learning a new language. So imagine you're learning a new language. You can practice speaking with speech recognition, get real-time feedback dynamically based on what phonemes you struggle with. You can get targeted lessons that help you learn those. Or imagine you're studying math and you're having particular challenges, and we figure that there's this prerequisite knowledge that you don't have. Move back to that and then serve you with targeted practice and targeted explanations until you achieve mastery. And one of the big differences is that we move from 60% or 70%, you get kind of a C or a B, and then you can still move on, to every single learner achieving mastery before they move on. And that's the point that was touched upon previously, in that if we're not making sure that the learner masters 100%, they're going to accumulate knowledge gaps over time. If you just learn 60% of 1 year of math and then you move on to the next one, you're going to struggle because you don't have the prerequisite knowledge. So that's what this system does. It provides this one-to-one tutoring that can completely personalize the experience, make sure that they master it, and then everyone can move forward at their own pace.
So you're doing this with video? Joel. Yeah, I've got a question, Joel. How does this work with, I guess, kids learning through social interaction and human connection? How would it work alongside that?
What we're seeing generally, and we're focused extensively on upskilling, but I've done a lot of work in more K-12 in the past as well, is this type of systems being used primarily for conceptual understanding, analyzing, some part of applying, remembering, but then the more kind of social interactions and so on, that's in other types of setups. But if we can increase the conceptual understanding, that also increases the value of those other interactions. But that's not the purpose of these systems, solving those challenges really well. But it's more being able to help you master specific concepts in math and the foundation, and then you can apply that and explore that in more creative setups.
What Is there other interesting innovations happening in ed tech kind of in parallel to what you're doing, Joel, that excites you?
I think the example of synthesis is really interesting, where they're changing the curriculum. I think the one of the areas I'm mostly excited about for traditional education is trying to replace the SAT, because ultimately everything just follows based on how we measure improvement. So if all of the high schools are just optimizing for the SAT, unless we change the SAT, much won't change in the system. But if we can replace the SAT with something that measures skills that we actually care about today, then that would force all high schools to adapt. So I think if someone was able to replace the SAT, there's one company called Embellis that tried in the past. That would probably be one of the most powerful inventions in learning.
Very cool. And then what's been the biggest friction so far, or like currently? What's the biggest challenge kind of up ahead, I should say?
So now we're focused on more the corporate and upskilling segment, and we've done some working together with universities and so on in the past. But I think what's notoriously difficult in ed tech is finding the right go-to market where you can scale. For us as an organization, one thing we're betting extensively on is self-serve, enabling anyone to use the power of these tools for a range of applications, and reducing the friction, and empowering anyone to both create these types of personalized courses, but then ultimately also to consume them.
That's super cool.
And Joe, I have a question. Is it that the curriculum, is it on video, or the majority of it, or is it a tutor, or?
Sorry, I missed that.
Is it like your application? Is it running mostly with videos?
It can be anything, really. It can be interactive explanations, graphs that you can play with, writing code, and then having that code being automatically corrected and get feedback on. Can be video. So anything, really. And I think that's another opportunity where you can iterate a lot on how the content is developed. I mean, if you look at most kind of educational content, it's just been mirroring either a classroom lesson, like if you take all Coursera content, it's just recording a tutor standing in front of a whiteboard, or putting textbooks online. And I think it's going to be really exciting seeing how we can evolve the content to be much more interactive as well.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I just want to say thanks for joining us. I'm glad to hear your voice again. Unfortunately, not your face, because you're quite a handsome guy in person. But hopefully, are you still working out of the? I guess not, because now that everyone's on COVID. But I know we will both happen to be at Frederick's place there. The what does he call his space there?
Alma.
Alma, yeah. You still working out at Alma?
We're actually we got the chance to sign a new office space in December, which was very timely. Which we're moving into now in August. One of the things I'm mostly excited about is we have this tea room now in the cellar, which is going to be a Faraday cage, so you won't be able to get any cell phone connection or Wi-Fi. So I look forward to spending a lot of time there.
Some real learning happening there, yeah.
Yeah.
Funny. But it is really good to hear your voice, and what you're working on is not only cool and impressive, but really important, and one of the keys to helping drive things forward in a very real way. Jean-Francois on stage is somebody you should probably connect with here in Clubhouse. What he's working on is also incredibly cool. He has a bot like companion that's AI based, and he's been working on it for a decade, and it's some of the people on stage have been using it as a virtual companion, and he's got thousands of people who are inadvertently falling in love with it and making marriage proposals and etc. But it's an AI essentially. But he's one of the notable players in the space. So it's
what I like is what's amazing is that he's getting all the knowledge transfer when he's doing this with the business, and then all this knowledge could be integrated in Leah. So that's why it's really, really, really interesting.
Hey, Joel, if you're interested in measurement, I can help you out with that. There's a really, really good research going on in Berkeley that is already implemented into something called Lexile Framework, which is also a company that's doing really interesting stuff on math and English learning.
Yeah, I'd love that. Like many of the best researchers in this space are from Berkeley. Zach Pardos, one of the professors there, is someone I've been collaborating a bit with in the past. So I'd love to get connected there.
Yeah, super cool. We've got a whole bunch of regular news to get into, but I love the idea of going into the ed tech conversation side of things, and it's a mix of ed and AI. I mean, you're dancing, you have one foot in both firmly, and that's the secret sauce to what you're doing, of course. I do want to ask you though, being one of the best AI minds in the Nordics, other AI things going on that really excite you?
I think I'm quite focused on the learning space, but we've been working a lot with the GPT-3 the past 6 months.
Yep.
And that's obviously the big thing. I think what was most interesting is as we started developing with GPT-3, we were trying to figure out like how to prompt it essentially. GPT-3 is a model published by OpenAI, the AI company founded by Elon Musk and Sam Altman, which has developed like a state-of-the-art model for that has been trained on billions of pages of text.
We just covered a headline here recently. China just is claiming to have achieved their own version of GPT-3 based on Chinese text and everything. Did you catch that headline like 48 hours ago?
No, I didn't. But we've been fortunate to play with that model, and we actually run it in production as well. And I still don't think people realize like it's been very hyped, but when you actually work with it, I've never seen anything similar. You can essentially prompt the model we use that exact same model for everything from translation. You can ask any type of natural language question to it. You can get it to complete your code. Given that it's been trained on billions of pages, you can essentially prompt it to do anything that might have been represented in the pages that it's been trained on. And I'm extremely excited to see that being applied in various contexts. And I think what we've seen to date has been primarily gimmicks, but we're increasingly seeing real-world applications of it that are extremely meaningful. For example, imagine you can generate books for children which are at exactly their difficulty level, addressing the exact things they have challenges with, the exact phonemes they find tricky, and so on. So you could dynamically generate content for each learner based on even aspects like their interests.
And I guess even more so eventually into people that are dyslexic, for example, kind of have optimized sort of, once it's recognized that they have dyslexia, it could kind of coordinate and rejigger accordingly to optimize for particular learning disabilities, whatever they happen to be.
Exactly. So that's and as you code it, you basically write, like we got it to generate questions as well. That's another application. And then we just ask it, like you actually just write in natural language, like, can you please make the question more difficult, or use simpler words, or write it to a fourth grader. and just based on that prompt, it would generate questions which were remarkably good.
So
Wow,
cool.
it's
So
amazing.
cool. That is so cool, man. Oh man. I'm
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope you don't laugh at me, Joe. But do you see the AI at some point come up with a better education plan? You know, when we go to school, we learn a lot of stuff that we are not going to use it. Even when we go to college, when we are in real work environment, and we know our education needs in really overhaul. Do you see the AI helping, you know, the education environment to go to that, to better, you know, education plan for our children?
I think one thing we found that was quite interesting was, in some cases, the sequence at which things are taught were incorrect. So by analyzing how people moved through these concepts and what sequences were optimal, you could find better curriculums, essentially, that the schools could subsequently use. But what I think is also very cool is, imagine, like, you want to learn anything, and a system being able to just find your path there based on the knowledge you already have and the knowledge that you want to have, dynamically generating the exact path that is optimal for you. That's another thing that I think. So, but what we're seeing today is this, like, example. Imagine you're creating a math curriculum, and a system could analyze how students have been learning it in the past, and then optimize the sequence and create a curriculum that can then be delivered in schools, and that's happening already.
It's so
Wow,
cool.
this is amazing, and as you said, it could it could take 50% than what it was taking for a completed course. It's crazy.
Yeah, half the time
Absolutely.
and 3 times the retention. It's a absolute game changer. Yeah.
Right.
Joe, I got a question for you. So this is a bit more of a philosophical question, but one of the purposes, at least one of the purposes I think that school is for you to figure out what you're good at, a very cheap way of figuring out what you're good at, and also a very cheap way of figuring out what your passion is in. So, like at school, I realized I'm very good at, say, math and the STEMs, and I was awful at music. So I never harbored any intention when I grew up to become a musician. I figured out that that's not my path, so I should go into the path that I'm better at. With these type of models, do you think that's going to accelerate those avenues and those paths?
For sure. And one thing I'm very hopeful about is removing a bit the distinctiveness between different subjects, and we're seeing that happen in Finland already. I mean, math and economics and physics is to a large extent artificially separated, and it would make much more sense, I think, to have interdisciplinary subjects where
Exactly.
you combine the insights from
So
these different areas.
intersectional math, you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, but I think that's what will hopefully move towards, and we're already seeing that in Finland, how they're splitting up this artificial separation, and instead doing interdisciplinary project work where you might develop a motion, and in order to develop that, you have to think through the economics, you have to think through, do some modeling, maybe simulation, so you get some practice in code. Then you have to present this, so then you do some rhetorics, and so on. And that's, of course, much more aligned with the type of work that we actually do throughout our lives.
I think a
Hey,
lot
Joe.
more.
Joe, just
Sorry.
a quick question. We have a startup. I know we're not allowed to talk about startups. There are a lot of work. Reliance in India. They are doing massive work on AR, especially on this education space, right? They bought this AR glass out of MIT Labs. I think it was called Tesseract a couple of years ago, and so they invested. I mean, working closely with them last 3 years. I mean, they are massively into this.
Tesseract was the OCR, open source library for OCR. I don't think it was the name of the lens, but
No,
I'll
it
look
is.
it up.
So it's out of the MIT Media Lab. It's called Tesseract, Tesseract, Tesseract.
Yeah, that was also the OCR library, the open source OCR, optical character recognition library.
So this is where the so this is a spin-off from the AR VR space. So they, I mean, what is it? Reliance bought them a couple of years. I mean, couple of years ago. So this is I don't know the exact. This is myholo.io. You know, they're from the HoloBoard. Right, their recent product is they received this thing called HoloBoard, so which has been put onto the Reliance AR glass. So anyway, so there's a massive team that you know, when Ambani goes after things, you know, he really goes after it. One of the things that I learned in the last 2 years is that he put massive amount of money, and he personally involved in this, completely disrupt the education space through AR and VR. So there is that space as well. I think the way I see it is the future is between what these guys are working on Sana Lab, and then synthesis, and then VR, AR. I think that's how the whole personalized will take shape.
Yeah, that's extremely exciting. I actually have to jump now, Tyler. But thank you so much for letting me. I hope I didn't destroy the flow of this.
No, it's a new.
No.
Can I just
Joel.
ask a quick question before you go? Like, I also develop AI tools for mental health screening and things like that. I'm like all for this progress to make this type of technology more accessible to everyone. But another question I want to see: education has been throughout history also misused by different political entities, governments, and so on. And this can hide behind code very anonymously. And what do you think for the future to make that those tools that you develop and other people develop won't be misused by dictatorship and by other governments to basically then in the end take away in a very broad range diversity of information for those kids during and because this could lead to the quite opposite of education and hiding between those algorithms if there's not a person or a teacher or academics that are traditionally more liberal and towards anti-dictatorship and so on, and journalism interests. What are the measurements that you think should be applied for the future?
I would recommend reading OpenAI's research on this. They do a lot of work on policy, and obviously with their more recent model, they want to make sure that it doesn't get misused. And they've been publishing some really interesting research. But I would say this is one issue I'm actually pretty concerned by, especially the issue of recommender systems and how these recommender systems can end up feeding people rabbit holes of conspiracy theories. And I think that might be one of the greatest challenges of our time now, and it's to a large extent more immediate impact of AI. But I would recommend reading OpenAI's research on this, and they're far more eloquent and thoughtful than I am. So I'm sure you'll find that pretty interesting.
Cool. Thank you, Joel. I know you got to run, but you definitely, it was a really fun kind of interview because it's an addition to the format of what we hope to do here is start to bring in interesting folks like yourself that can help us do interesting deep dives into topics. So hopefully catch up again soon. And thanks again.
Brilliant. Talk soon. Thanks
Alrighty.
a lot, Tyler.
Cheers.
Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I don't think it could get any worse than what already exists
That's
today.
what I was thinking.
The code. So if you look at American history, just the whole narrative, the proclamation line, the Alamo, Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was officially a celebration of the massacre of Native Americans, the Pequot tribe. So when you're studying history at the college level, it's completely different to what you were taught at the high school or primary school level. And then it's not even that it's nuanced. It's like it's completely fiction.
Exactly.
And so especially when it comes to matters like slavery, Native Americans, genocide, etc. So I don't see how code could make it any worse than the myth making we already have?
Like that
Well,
ideological
that's why I said
subversion is
very
really
important.
sorry, somebody talk.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. That's why I'm saying that having academia professors and so on check on these things, that are still people behind there and diverse people behind there checking those, and have, that the AI by itself won't make like education decisions driven by just a few people that make those algorithms with their biased ideas. I
That's already the case. So I'm saying that's how history books are written.
Exactly.
So I don't think this matters in subjects like math or physics or whatnot. But if you're going down the lane of like studying politics or history or all of that stuff, that already exists. It's existed for the last couple hundred years. So I don't see the difference between code or not. So
Because you can use it in a broader range, and on top of it, we know already that algorithms are being designed in a biased way, which people who they target and how. Let's say a girl that goes out there in the virtual world will have other suggestions than a boy, and then if you're from a different race and from a different background and so on. So it really depends behind the designer, because you can basically make those biases and even worse, and you won't have an option because it's already basically decided what you're going to become and what your interests are, and then based on that you are being molded that way. I know this happens.
So I don't know what you're talking about, because algorithms are just mathematical functions. If you design a bad mathematical function, you'll get bad outcomes. If you design a good mathematical function, you'll get better outcomes. It's just very simple.
Yeah,
Algorithms, by
of
definition,
course, but that's the
cannot be biased. You could have a
a
shitty
few people.
algorithm which will
Yeah,
create
but
shitty
you already have
results.
a few people making very shitty algorithms based on what you want to make.
I gotta get in on
Go,
this one.
hey, Sal, Katarina, Clubhouse has this amazing new feature where you can go into a private room together. I would pay to go into the room that you two should start together and to debate this point. But it's going to take that AI ethics discussion will take at least the next 2 hours. And to this point, there is a headline today, actually, literally today. And the headline is that, and we covered it in the previous session 7 hours ago, just to highlight it, that Google is doubling down on their AI ethics team, which has been fraught with layoffs and internal kind of friction, as was reported in the news a few months ago. When that was happening, they had some layoffs that sparked a lot of headlines, and it was unclear what was going to happen. And it was there was a very recent headline about 2-3 days ago that the head of that team has now moved over to Facebook, which really brought it into question of what exactly is going on with this Google AI ethics team. And then the headline today is that the Google AI ethics team is not shutting down. Google says it plans to double the size of its team studying AI ethics in the coming years as it looks to strengthen the group battered by recent controversies, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. I will share the tweet from the Tech News Around the World Twitter account, which I encourage everybody to follow. It's very simply TNATW, which is short for Tech News Around the World. There it is. Boom. I just sent it, so you can read that article yourself if you're interested. And that's the other fun part of this room, is there's the Twitter feed acts as a sort of companion where we share the articles related to the conversations that we're having in real time. So it's almost like a second screen experience if you are into multitasking. But while we're on the topic of kind of these political issues, I wanted to turn it to Justin, who covers political issues in his rooms in a way which I'm a huge fan of. Justin, I know you had a Politico headline to share, yeah?
Yeah, political one that directly impacts basically everything in big tech, right? So, as everybody knows, the United States is super duper polarized, and that has kind of shown up in the way that presidential nominees have been getting votes in Congress. Usually it's been along partisan lines for a lot of these people. But yesterday, Lena Khan, or recently, I should say, Lena Khan, who is a 32-year-old, so I'm jealous of her being a 32-year-old, was advanced out of committee to be the next Federal Trade Commission commissioner. And as everybody knows, that's the commission that kind of deals with a lot of antitrust law and enforcing that type of law. Now, the reason why this is big news is twofold, right? So I hit on it in the beginning. Our country is very polarized, and she could have gotten out of committee just on Democrat lines, but she had bipartisan support. And this is big because she's a progressive. She taught law at Columbia University, which is a progressive university, and she's come out with many different progressive viewpoints on certain pieces of legislation. But she received support from conservative members of the Senate, like the senator from Mississippi, Roger Wicker, who is very conservative and traditionally pro-business. Now, the real big news here is, well, why are these conservatives supporting such a progressive woman of color? Well, it's pretty easy. She's against big tech, and she wants to reform antitrust legislation in a way that allows for the breaking up of platforms like Amazon et al. So I think that this is a very big piece of news, not only because she will be confirmed by the Senate and she will be the next FTC commissioner, not only that she has antitrust chops and is considered to be absolutely brilliant, but because the news behind the news here is this points to a larger trend going on in politics that many in Silicon Valley are oblivious to, which is the eventual coalescing around some type of bipartisan legislation to break up big tech. This is just another stake in the ground in kind of how Congress works. They're slowly inching towards coming together.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Justin, can you comment a little bit on what you've learned? Because this is what I love about, like everybody thinks that, friends are friends and enemies are enemies, but I think we've been frenemies and friends and all kinds of different things. But I learned something from you here today, like I often do. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think might happen? What are people saying might happen when it comes to enforcing antitrust? And is it all big tech companies, or is it just the ones like Amazon? What do you think?
Yes. I don't know. All that I can say is, so it sounds like from all of the reading that I've done, and I'm not an antitrust lawyer or anything like that, but that what the Biden administration is going to do is going to support some of the lawsuits that are currently moving through. As I think Tyler touched on the last time I was in news. There's 45 attorney generals that sent letters to Google and a couple of other people about antitrust legislation, and they also sent money to Congress. So I see really a 2 or 3 pronged approach here. First prong is getting conservatives on side with Democrats so that there can be more federal money going to these different states, which are pursuing antitrust legislation against companies like Amazon and Google. And that will be the immediate term. The longer term will be trying to reform the law because, as people are aware, there is serious concerns whether true antitrust and true breaking up of these big companies can be done under the way the laws are written. And I think that this liberal progressive has written papers that point to concerns saying we need to reform the laws. And then the third thing is which platforms would they go after? So I can't speculate and put stuff in her mind or in her mouth, but she has focused on platforms. So mostly things like Amazon, which drive down costs and actually hurt like brick and mortar businesses. But I would assume that her views are consistent across everything like Twitter and Facebook and the other ones.
Interesting. I just sent your article to the Tech News Around the World Twitter account for those who want to dive deep on it. Yeah, Greg?
So yeah, like it would not be the first time that I, as a slightly conservative, actually mostly independent, but not the capital I independent, the lowercase I independent, supported a woman of color to go out there and kick ass and take names on the right stuff. I actually think we underestimate, and Justin, not you, but we in general underestimate the biases. The biases are actually wrong. There's a lot of people over here in my state of Texas that fucking love it when a woman stands up, kicks ass, and takes names. A woman of color, it just doesn't matter to them. They want to get the right things done. And sometimes you got to reach across the aisle and shake hands with your friends in California or your friends in liberal land. And these big tech companies are the friends of nobody. Just wait until you say something that they don't like and they shut you down. I'm really curious what she's going to do about some of these, not First Amendment free speech issues, but some of these corporate free speech issues that are happening with these giant monopoly-like platforms. So that'll be really interesting to watch. And Justin, thanks for bringing it up. I'd love to join one of your rooms and talk about this topic, and maybe we can, with our powers combined, get her or some interesting people in the administration to come talk about this.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Awesome. And
I
just quickly, so on the big platforms, tracking back to what you mentioned before, Tyler, on Google, right, and on the AI ethics area, hemorrhaging talent. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because the rooms that we were in with my other fellow AI colleagues were debating that AI ethics for like those are the 55R rooms on MC Hammer. So the so what is, I know that Decay is from Google, so I'd love to hear. He's not online at the moment to ping him in, but I'd love to get him in here and see what he thinks in this space of the talent hemorrhaging.
Yeah, that's a whole separate. Let's do a deep dive room on that. Like he does a lot of those, but he seems to have been doing less of those lately. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but which is unfortunate because he's really one of the fantastic room creators here on Clubhouse as well, along with Justin. And that's one of the things we're doing here is trying to get the smart brain trust on this stage to go deeper into their own fields, and we support them and help share the traffic that we generate in this room to go into those. Which, by the way, you can see a self-serving plug here, but it is the top of the hour for a room refresh. If you click on the title of this room, you will see the Tech News Club, where you will see our schedule of upcoming rooms, which you'll notice is vastly growing into lots of other topics around AI, which Dave is part of those as well, and green tech and med tech and crypto and others. And what we do is hope to take advantage of the crowd that gathers here kind of loyally each day, and then funnel it into those other fantastic conversations to go deeper into more niche topics like we did yesterday, like we'll do today, like we'll do tomorrow. And it's just a continuation of the growth of the Tech News family here, which I encourage everyone to participate in. It's been a lot of fun, and it's a beautiful corner of Clubhouse that we play in here together. But we do got a lot of headlines to jump into. Thank you for the Justin on
Tyler,
the political
just
front.
before you move
Hey,
on,
Tyler.
Yep.
can I just say something really quickly? Because just really quickly on the AI thing. So Dakai and I have been talking about potentially getting Joy. So she was the one that was featured in the Netflix documentary to talk about the biases. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. So I'll let you know if that's something that might. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh yeah, so I just wanted to say this is early, but I'm in contact with Mike Shellenberger to actually do a room on climate change. He's one of the world's leading authorities, a published author on the topic, and somebody I actually defer to when it comes to climate.
The nuclear,
Yeah, well, nuclear and beyond, like the true cost and the true benefits of some of these climate solutions. Unlike some of the people that we've heard in here before, Mike has real numbers to back it up on a global scale and taking all of the variables into account. He's super well followed for a reason, but I literally trust what he says on climate above what I think on climate, which is a big. I don't know if you know me pretty well.
Yeah, that's a bold statement. Yeah, no, I've not heard that before. That's noteworthy.
So,
it's huge.
We're literally like he's very well followed. He's very well followed. We're lucky to have him, and I'll be releasing details about that talk here pretty soon. I'd love to get your help actually moderating that room.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want.
Can I jump in here when you have a second?
Yeah, well, let's do the green tech dance tango. But
first I can't let that go without comment. You know my public service announcement I made in the previous room, time zone room.
Yeah,
that applies to Shellenberger as well.
What is?
Dan, unlike you, Shellenberger actually does have expertise. Like you are the Dunning-Kruger effect personified, and you have no place talking about climate. I don't know who you are. And so if you want to come in the room and actually be educated
if
on
you
the
tell
topic,
me
feel
that
free to do so.
you support Schellenberger, then I know where you stand on climate.
Well, literally, dude, were unable to understand the point that I was making to you because you don't understand basic math. The last time we were in the room together,
Well,
there's
I'm
no
actually
room. There's no
yeah.
room for Dunning-Kruger effect in these discussions. You're welcome to come into the room and ask intelligent questions and listen to the responses versus assassinating Schellenberger's character like you did last time. And now I have to assassinate your character in front of everybody to make up for the fact that you're dogging on this guy with no real reason
You're
why they
welcome to
should listen to
try.
him.
Yeah, I think I have the solution to this. Is that do you have an idea of when that might happen, Greg?
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to be morning Central Time, which I think is compatible with Europe, as well as when people are and we're looking at doing it sometime in the next couple of weeks. I'm in contact with him over email. He's a busy guy because he's actually qualified on the topic. He does a lot of stuff, but I'm actually going to be sponsoring this talk to make it happen.
Oh, cool. Well,
and it's going to be in the next couple of weeks here.
I'm sure people will appreciate the opportunity, and I imagine that would be hopefully Dan has a chance to contribute in that space and challenge.
We will actually bring him up and let him talk with Shellenberger directly, as long as the talk is more about the facts and less about the character assassination.
Because then we can keep this room dedicated to the headlines and the news, and then they can do the deep dive into
so
the.
Tyler, on the AI ethics that we talked about earlier, I think one of the things is worth noting. I think people don't talk about openly is this. So there is two AI ethics board, one within Google, right? One is just for the to police the politicians, and the second is the one that DeepMind. So just before I don't know if many of you guys were aware. Because I know a couple of guys in DeepMind, and before the acquisitions, they made sure that there was a draft, there was an agreement in place. It's called the AI ethics and safety review agreement. So that was part of the agreement that they made sure that the DeepMind will acquired by Google. So the reason they did that is that when they get the general AI, so when their core mission is to build the AGI, the general intelligence, and if they were to succeed in that, so the job of that in order to control the machine will lie on that governing panel, which is called the ethic board. So there's two different ethics board. So they had that signed up before even the DeepMind acquired by Google. So that's something that Google keep it very secret. Who's on that board? No one knows who's on that board.
Well, it's thanks for the follow up on that. With green tech. What else did we want to get in here today? We got politics. Before we do, I have a couple of politics ones. Has Justin left already? Justin's still here. Good. I want to just dance through the political ones. If there's any, there is an update on the dark side hacking of the Colonial Pipeline that we touched on previously, which essentially is that Krebs on security did a very lengthy blog post where he found their website on the dark web and shared a lot of it in his blog post. I will send that to the Tech News Around the World Twitter account. So if you want to read what DarkSide themselves are saying on their own sort of dark web website, but they are clearly distancing themselves from any political state actors. It does seem to, as the FBI is saying, seem to have some Eastern European Russian connections. And the reason that's unclear, but rather consistently noted, is because the tool that they developed, DarkSide version 2.0, the tool that's used in hacking the pipeline company, but not literally the pipes themselves, which, by the way, the company Colonial is saying that they are managing to start to get it back online, and they hope to have it all back online soon. Although there are interesting Instagrams being shared on the America's eastern seaboard, where there are gas stations without gas now, which is having tremendous impact on folks. There was also a very funny tweet from Bored Elon Musk, which is a fun parody account, kind of pretending to be Elon Musk, where he says, if there was only a car that could drive without gas that could benefit from this difficult times. And Elon Musk himself replied to it with these two big googly eyes, like these kind of holy shit eyes, like almost like our conspiracy music theme song that I play, kind of the googly eye version of that. So Elon being comical as usual on Twitter, but and an interesting wild theory as to who might be behind the hacking here. Clearly not Tesla, but a fun joke nonetheless. But going back to the hack, as I said, I'll tweet out the deep dive article from the Twitter account for those who want to do the real deep dive on that issue, and it's a continuing development. No doubt there will be even more developments about it tomorrow, and we will be here to figure it out. I'm predicting eventually these knuckleheads will get busted because now they've hit they acknowledge this themselves, that they didn't mean to attack such a formidable foe. Actually, they didn't mean to poke the bear in the eye, which is, the NSA and the CIA. They want to poke smaller players who don't have the resources of the CIA and the NSA. And now that they've got the CIA involved, they know their days are numbered. And now they're kind of backtracking and saying, we're not state actors, we're just here to make a quick buck, and sorry for the trouble, sir. But yeah, I think their days are numbered, and we will be watching this with interest. So stay tuned for that. But Justin, did you have any kind of political sense on this? Is there any kind of talk in Washington, D.C. on this issue?
I got to run for a call, but I will say this. I have spoken to some friends on one of the committees of jurisdiction here, and although they aren't at liberty to explain the kind of hard intelligence, and honestly, they haven't been briefed yet between us, but there is sentiment that they believe that this is a Russian non-state actor. So basically, think of plausible deniability, but think of how Iran funds proxy wars, like Hamas and stuff, and Hezbollah. That's kind of what the view is, and people are fucking pissed. But I do got to run.
Go ahead. So there's a couple of other. Go ahead. And by the way,
Justin.
follow Justin because he hosts fantastic conversations on political issues.
He'll be back.
That's all right. So there's two other little political headlines I want to touch on, Dan, before we get into the green tech headlines, which is WhatsApp's new data policy, which Germany doesn't like, and so there's a showdown going on between WhatsApp in Germany but essentially WhatsApp is now warning people, if you don't accept our new data policy, you're going to start losing functionality like the ability to message people and call people, and so it's an interesting strategy there. The other political headline worth noting today is actually a very positive one, which is Uber and Lyft are working with the Biden administration to provide free rides on both Uber and Lyft to and from vaccine locations, which I just want to highlight is a truly fantastic use case of tech working together with politics and doing something, whatever your feelings are about Uber. I think we can all agree that's a super cool thing that they're doing, and I don't think it's just a PR stunt. There is PR goodwill that comes along with it, but let's give it to them. When tech companies, it's rare that people do PR stunts that have that much actual intrinsic good value to it. So I applaud them for that. And so green tech wise, go ahead, Dan, if you have a headline to share.
Well, this is an interesting one, and it actually will probably apply beyond just green tech. So I thought it was quite interesting. There's a guest post in Carbon Brief, which is carbonbrief.org, and it's from folks from University of College London and someone from a group called ARUP. And what they did is they looked at the models that predict the cost of mitigating climate change by switching to renewables. And in their models, they assume that these technologies decrease over time, which of course is true. And so therefore, they tried to figure out what's the least cost way of doing it by at times waiting to deploy the technologies until the price drops. But then these folks looked at the situation and realized the price drops actually by deploying the technology. So they said actually, first of all, the cost to mitigate is lower than is assumed here. And number two, you can actually deploy much sooner because that is what actually gets the price to drop. I mean, it seems kind of obvious in ways, but when you're doing these models, you have to be very careful what your assumptions are. So the bottom line is that it's cheaper to address climate change than some of these models have said, and the idea is that you should actually deploy as quickly as you can. This was found in Germany, by the way, when they did their feed-in tariff, and you know, there was a shortage of solar panels, and you know, the price was high right away. But that also caused a tremendous drop in the cost of solar, and helped everybody else around the world, basically.
Yep.
So very interesting point there. I don't know if you want me to make my public service announcement as well again, but I did yesterday.
No, we'll keep that between you and me. No, I have it from the last record. There's the driving down of, it's fun to watch day by day the updates that are leading to the price drops for both solar and batteries, and those are much appreciated. And at the same time, that it was an almost very exciting headline around Greta Thunberg and the Friday for Futures versus
that was good.
Standard Chartered. Yeah, and I'm optimistic that might still eventually become a headline. Yeah.
We talked about it before, but what I found to be very interesting about that is when I first thought it was real, before I found out it was a joke. Probably should have realized it was a joke right away. But I realized what unbelievable impact that would have, because that would drive all the other banks to have to follow. And in months, you would have the shutdown of this fossil fuel infrastructure funding, which means that actually Standard Chartered could have a huge impact on climate change by simply doing what they're going to do anyway. But I mean, it's clear they will do this. But doing it just a little bit ahead of time could have a huge impact.
Well, I think the Greta Thunberg army, which is quite considerable, especially now that we're coming out of the colder months and getting back into spring and summer. So they'll have 9 months of large protests, as they did around Germany and Europe, and they were quite impressive in scale. And so if they get very focused in who they are targeting, they can apply an incredible amount of pressure. And I think that is the right strategy for them going forward, is to be more targeted about what precisely change they want to see and be unified in that. And if they apply it to one particular company, that could move the needle in a way that as you're describing. I did find, and Heyman also found,
if I may. This is Vasuki Shastri. I actually used to work for Standard Chartered.
Nice.
I used to run sustainability until 2 years ago. And I think the challenge that this Greta Thunberg campaign, I think raises attention on international banks. I don't think it gets enough attention here in the US.
Right.
The fact that each of these international banks have massive fossil fuel exposures, all of them have committed to decarbonize, all of them have net zero targets, so on the face of it, everything looks very impressive. But actually, quietly, they continue to lend into coal. And there isn't an enforcement mechanism to go after JPM unless you've got these resolute NGOs who are doing all the research and diligence. I guess my final message here is we've got to take all of these commitments by these large corporations with a huge pinch of salt.
Yeah, of course. But what would you do if you were Greta, and how would you direct your army of Friday Future protesters? Or what do you think, maybe a better question is, what is the right strategy to get Standard Chartered to, not finance coal
Greta
production?
should go take her army and go give Bill Gates a pep talk and say that he's still a good guy, even though Melinda left him, even though he had a misstep there. And basically
I would say,
go run roughshod on nuclear.
Yeah.
I think the Bill Gates option. The Bill Gates option is always there, but I would, actually target young staff in these international banks. All of them want to be associated with employers who are doing the right thing.
I think
at least my.
Yeah.
What's even better than a bank? Being a bank.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's right. I think you target the younger folks in the organization who have still some spunk in their, youthful steps and, morally minded, ethically, and they want to shape the company in the way that they see for the future, etc. It's a really interesting
I
point.
would totally be for that, except that these banks and the relevant bureaucracies that I've dealt with have gotten so big that they can literally crush the spirits of those young people with ease. They've turned it into an art form. And so you actually need people with real power to delegate authority to folks like that. And so I'm all about it, but I want to do it in an effective way. And that does not involve them. Like, basically, they'll just route it into, let's do a group inside the company where you can talk about these important issues like climate change, and then they exhaust themselves thinking that they're making progress but never get anything done.
By the way, I don't know about the young people
typical
you're talking.
espionage tactics.
Yeah.
I don't know about the young people you guys are talking about at banks. Everyone I knew in college who wanted to be a consultant or investment bank would sell their soul to the devil. So I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
That's also
That's
true.
a bit unfair.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I think that's very unfair. I mean, I actually worked for a bank for many years.
He's trying to make you have to forgive him. He's trying to make a humorous joke, and that sometimes culturally doesn't translate. So, just filling it in there. So I my parents are endless comedians, so I appreciate the humor about Sal. But here's another political headline that I just found, and Heyman also found. If you don't mind, Heyman, I'll read it just for the sake of brevity here, from the Wall Street Journal and others. Actually, there's quite a few people covering, and in fact, this might be the biggest tech story of the day. The U.S. agrees to remove Xiaomi, the mega Chinese hardware manufacturer Xiaomi, from the big Chinese American blacklist that could have restricted American investment in the company following Xiaomi's lawsuit in the U.S. earlier this year. U.S. to vacate the order designating the company as military linked to China, and Xiaomi had sued the U.S. government following the Trump order to ban Xiaomi along with the other list of companies like Huawei and others. And this is now being reported by Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNET, Forbes, and others, getting a lot of coverage. From the Wall Street Journal, they say the Pentagon backs off Xiaomi blacklisting after legal challenge. Chinese tech giant joins several peers that have successfully won courtroom reprieves against Trump-era actions. I will tweet this from the Tech News Around the World Twitter account per usual, but it is interesting to see that Xiaomi not only managed to do this in the U.S., as these headlines today are highlighting, they also managed to do it in India, where India had also included Xiaomi as part of their Chinese company bans, and Xiaomi strategy was to build a factory in India, employing thousands of Indians, because Xiaomi is one of the biggest smartphone manufacturers in the world. And they don't want to lose those incredibly juicy markets like India and the US. And so they do. It's interesting to see how they handle these situations. And as a fan, as a huge Xiaomi consumer myself, I would be incredibly hypocritical if I didn't say it's interesting to watch how they operate as a company, and I'll leave it at that. But I will tweet this from the Twitter account so everyone can deep dive on that. And I encourage you to share interesting headlines that you're finding on Twitter as well, and tag the Twitter account TNATW, which I see all of them coming in. Thank you to JT and Cheryl, who just shared an Amazon.
My first ever tweet.
Yeah.
Oh no, the SoftBank was the first one. Amazon is the second one. Amazon, thanks to Sarah.
Yeah. So Cheryl just shared a tweet and tagged the Tech News Around the World Twitter account, TNATW. So that's where I'm seeing it right now, and I'm retweeting it in one click, which is fantastic. I love how this works. So the headline is from the BBC News: Amazon has $250 million in back taxes overturned in court. A court has overturned an EU order for Amazon to pay millions in taxes in Luxembourg. And this was a story that we were touching on, I think, yesterday or the day before, about Amazon's taxes in Europe. Just recently, this was a huge headline because it was announced they didn't pay any taxes this year because they didn't make any profits. And there was the issues, of course, we debated this a bit here on stage, around the Luxembourg structure of what they're doing, and is it legal? And then a representative from Amazon said, hey, we didn't make any profit. Companies pay taxes on profits, deal with it. And then, the whole European structure of companies setting up in Luxembourg to avoid taxes. But the article from BBC says Amazon has $250 million of back taxes overturned in court. Amazon has won a court battle over $250 million in taxes it had been ordered to pay Luxembourg. The EU Commission had ordered the tech giant to repay the funds in back taxes, alleging that Amazon had been given unfair special treatment. But the EU General Court overturned that order, finding it had been given no selective advantage. Amazon said the decision was in line with our longstanding position that we follow all applicable laws. We're pleased that the court has made this clear, and we continue to focus on delivering for our customers across Europe, the company said in a statement. The contentious order dates back to 2017 when the EU Commissioner Margaret from Denmark had turned her attention to tech giants and their tax arrangements in some EU countries. The EU Commission had alleged that the tax deal amounted to state aid for the company, something which breaks the rules of the EU internal market. Both Amazon and the country of Luxembourg went to court to have the decision overturned. So they went together. And there was some really interesting stuff that was revealed in the exchanges between Amazon and Luxembourg in terms of how friendly they are, no doubt. And Luxembourg, of course, is courting these incredibly huge tech companies to be based there, just as Ireland used to do, actually, when they were in Ireland. And now they've had to move as a count of Apple losing a massive lawsuit in a similar way related to their Ireland structure. But one other important quote here to share: none of the findings set out by the EU Commission in the contested decision are sufficient to demonstrate the existence of an advantage for Amazon. The court said in a statement, the contested decision must be annulled in its entirety. The much larger tax bill for the similar case with Apple in Ireland involving $13 billion was also overturned last year. The Commission lodged an appeal in September. So the EU is finding it hard to actually force these tech companies, even after they're finding them in the case of Amazon today, $250 million, even after finding them, they're finding it hard to get the courts to approve it. Essentially, the companies like Apple and Amazon take it to court and end up winning in court, which leads to what should they do about it? And we did have a poll here, did we not, about are these big tech companies paying their fair share? And the audience voted overwhelmingly that they're not paying their fair share, actually.
Actually, Tyler, and these companies, none of them are doing anything wrong. They're completely legal. It's the stupidity of the EU is that they haven't realized. So this is nothing new. Like it's all internal invoicing, etc. And you do all this internal invoicing, especially when it relates to matters like IP, and pharma companies do this. In fact, European companies like Sanofi, which is a French company, does this all the time. They look at different tax jurisdictions, and then they do a lot of internal invoicing. And there's a number of different, this is nothing new. This has been going on for decades before big tech even emerged. The stupidity of the EU is that they didn't realize that big tech as a percentage of GDP has grown. And there's one tax that they cannot evade at all anywhere in the world, and that's a sales tax or any form of indirect taxation. Indirect taxation.
We needed your perspective.
Or a real estate tax.
Yeah. But I'm saying is indirect taxes is something they cannot avoid at all. So most of the corporate profit tax, it's based on the profits you make. But when you're a growth company, you reinvest that in new warehouses, in new in an expansion. So there's really not that much to tax there. You can either tax revenue, that's one option. So you could put a rule saying anyone that does over $5 or $10 billion in revenue, I'm going to take 2% of your revenue. That's one way of solving it. Another way of solving it is to increase the sales taxes. And so there's a number of ways. The EU just hasn't caught up to reality. The bureaucrats are so stuck in a mindset of the 1950s, and we even saw this with the deployment of vaccinations. They went on holiday while the Trump administration was negotiating prices with BioNTech for the Pfizer vaccination, which is why, even though it's German, the Germans are just about to get it now. So, like, they got the bureaucrats have to wake up to reality. The world's changed, and they have to figure out different ways of taxation.
Yeah. Somebody's got an open mic there. Thanks. A couple of other financial news. Bird, the e-scooter company that kind of kicked off the whole e-scooter craze out of Santa Monica, California, my hometown. Full transparency, I'm very friendly with a lot of the key folks who started it and the earliest investors being from my backyard, Bird agrees to go public via a SPAC at an implied valuation of around $2.3 billion. The deal includes $160 million investment led by Fidelity. The e-scooter company will ride its way to the New York Stock Exchange. And interesting to see if the others might soon follow suit. These e-scooter battles around the planet, of which I played a small role in trying to help Bird come to Stockholm, and they really screwed that up royally. But maybe it was for the best, and the local startup company Voi ended up really taking over the Swedish market and others in the area. But it's been really interesting to watch these e-scooter battles go on, and it becomes in large part a financial battle as to who can get the funding to keep the cost of the scooter ride subsidized and low enough to eat the market share. It's been just a classic Harvard Business School case study, essentially. But it's interesting to see now that one of these companies is finally having their kind of public event by going through a SPAC. Any thoughts on that from the stage?
Yeah, that's actually the one that I tweeted and tagged the
Oh, that's right,
account as
Shirley.
well.
Yes, thank you for that.
So I think it's interesting because I think that from a UK standpoint, there's been a sort of mixed, I'd say, reception in terms of e-scooters, because actually there's a YouTuber who died. I knew her. So a lot of people are concerned about just the safety aspect, but I do feel that there is a place for them, especially now that certain roads are being adjusted for bikes, especially because of the pandemic. So perhaps that there's going to be wider acceptance, because I think they are good for the planet. And also I feel that, I just feel like it's almost like I'd like to see them to replace the Boris bikes. I just think the e-scooters are pretty cool. So yeah, I just thought that was one I'd like to share as well.
Having knowing friends at some of these e-scooter companies, and of course they do make that point that there's a kind of green tech element to what they're doing, less cars on the road, yada yada. I'm curious if that's felt by the audience, and we could do a quick poll on that. But I want to ask the speakers on stage: do you think this is should we shoot our poll shot on this particular point of whether or not e-scooters are in fact ecological or have some environmental advantage? Dan, what's your take on these e-scooters?
I think, it depends how you look at them. I think they're environmentally, they have very small footprint. I think from a health perspective, they lead to a lot of injuries and hospitalizations. But yes, from an environmental point of view, they have very tiny footprint compared to any other larger vehicle.
Yeah, I guess it would be a one. I'm just trying to get a sense if it would be a lopsided poll, which we don't need to do those.
Yeah, we got to frame it better than that, because the advantage on one side is disadvantage on the other, right?
Yeah.
So
I think generally my sense is that the audience would say yes, these are very ecological, so there's no real sense in doing it a poll. But I wanted to hear if there might be somebody that voiced an opinion on the other side.
Yeah,
Tyler, I'm not.
Mafalda, welcome. Go ahead.
Hi. Weren't they removed from the streets of Paris? Sorry, I was just trying to Google it at the same time, but I'm away from my computer. But I think that especially in Paris, there were so many accidents and deaths even.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm away from Google. But weren't they removed from the roads in Paris and just allowed on bike lanes?
Well, here's what happened. Paris became the ground zero for the scooter battle in Europe. More than and I would argue more than anywhere else in the world. And I happened to be in Paris when that was happening, and I counted no less than 14 different e-scooter companies' bikes on the roads of Paris, and it got so competitive that the newer entries out of Eastern Europe were giving the rides away for free, so that they could get into the market share on this point, and that the roads were literally filled with them, like rats. I mean, it was just truly atrocious seeing that what I feel is one of the most beautiful cities anywhere, being just completely littered with these e-scooters, and it turned into something they were never intended to be, which is scooters on top of scooters in piles in front of Starbucks. I mean, literally, you'd have a pile of 10 of them because people they just became atrocious and a burden. And nobody
Tyler,
ever.
we could ask a question, right?
Yeah.
Like, should we encourage e-scooters?
Well, no, yeah, but here's what happened. Let's unpack this a little bit, because Paris became a very unique problem. I don't know that other cities suffered that same problem, because they realized we have too many of these. This has become a problem. And so they limited and created a number of licenses, and many cities copied this, including Stockholm, that said, okay, we're only going to allow, we've done the calculations, our city needs X number of these scooters. And we have, 1,000 or 5,000 that we're going to limit, and these companies are going to compete for these 1,000 or 5,000 licenses for our city. And I think Stockholm was one of the first to realize that was sort of the right approach, is doing a calculation of how many are actually needed based on the traffic patterns, yada, 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 and let the companies compete for those licenses, and the city can monetize those licenses. And those scooter companies were, of course, that's what it ended up being. And so I think that was the future forward. But when they're not charging the scooter companies anything, you had what ended up happening in Paris, where they became, kind of problematic to a certain extent. Yeah.
Can I add a comment?
Yeah.
E-scooters will also banned in Singapore, actually.
Completely?
Singapore footpaths.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
and offenders facing up to $2,000 penalty or jail up to 3 months.
Yeah, Singapore does not fuck around with policies. Yeah, but would they completely ban them in any use case, or just in walkways, or how was it?
Yeah, footpath, because
no. Are they banning them in footpaths, or they ban them from Singapore?
Footpath.
Oh, so they're not banned. Don't use that word. Yeah, just say they were restricted from footpaths. Yeah.
But you can't also do it on the roads because it's too dangerous.
Right. Yeah, you have to use bike lanes. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. But how is there a limit on the number of them in the city? Do you know that?
No.
Okay.
They don't do that.
Oh, interesting. Because it would be interesting to see if they end up having the same problem that Paris did. The problem is, I guess in the Singapore case, it sounds like they were fining the riders of the scooters and not the scooter owners, right?
Yeah, the rider. And I guess it's also because there were many accidents, and I think old people and also young kids were killed because of those accidents.
Yeah. But it becomes a challenge of like, who's responsible in these cases? Is it the driver or the owner? It's the same with the autonomous cars. It's like, who's going to be responsible for the autonomous car, and who's going to be responsible for the robot? And it turns into an AI ethics issue all over again. But
anyhow, the e-scooters have to be registered previously as well. So I think only the owners can ride on their e-scooters.
Yeah, well, they turned into an interesting situation in Denmark, for example, where people just started throwing them in the rivers.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and Tyler, that's where the environmental stuff starts to break down.
That's my point. That's why I raised the question, yeah.
Yeah, the lithium batteries in the rivers is really a bad deal. And so that's what we had here in Silicon Valley. We had, maybe rival companies or somebody was throwing them into the rivers, and we were starting to detect stuff going into the water control plant. So
yeah. I want to ask David, because he's on the ground in Beijing. Are these e-scooters still happening in any kind of substantial way in Beijing?
So the preferential thing used by most consumers is still the bike sharing platforms, but the e-scooters actually have a really interesting use. So the largest car hailing platform in China is now Didi.
Didi, right?
And Didi employs them for their designated drivers. So at night when you go out drinking, because the fine now for DUI is so high that people can hire designated drivers on Didi, and they come with one of these e-scooters. They put it in your boot, and then once they drive you back home, they take it back out of your boot and then get to their next client.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, but in terms of regular consumers, I almost never see this on the street, as the shared bike platform is so much more prevalent in town.
I wonder if that's because of the size and scale of the city. And maybe the electrical component and whatnot. It's interesting. I often look to China now as like where the rest of us will end up, in a few years.
But it's very possible, because Beijing is so big in the way it was urban designed.
Yeah.
So usually
massive,
the urban design is like 10 minutes between each subway station,
right,
and then 2 minutes on the subway, right? Beijing is like double that.
right.
But even in Shanghai, we don't see a lot of these scooters. So I don't know why the adoption never really took place.
Yeah. Instagram and Twitter apologizing for deleting pro-Palestinian posts, blaming technical errors. And this sounds incredibly similar to the Resign Modi Facebook issue that we covered 4 or 5 days ago, does it not? Where and I think we can use Michelle, who joins us from Facebook each day, and gave us some really valuable inside perspective as to why Facebook was removing the Resign Modi hashtags, which I think Akil, you initially brought up that article, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Michelle from Facebook was on stage, and she said, actually, we were all theorizing, why are they doing this? Clearly, they must be paid by and have some connections to the Modi camp, and they're just doing the master's bidding, so to speak. And it turns out, she said, no, actually, we have hundreds of countries that we have to deal with on a daily basis, and it gets very difficult to manage, and they're semi-automated, semi-algorithmic, semi-human moderated, and mistakes happen when you are dealing with 100 countries with 100 different political entities you have to interface with. And you know what? That actually makes some sense, honestly. So I guess there is room for error. And
Tyler, actually, we came up with a conspiracy theory that day because the wording in the statement was very similar to some sort of them saying, hey, we didn't do what Twitter did.
Right.
And that's why we came up with the theory that day.
You know what was interesting is we actually did a vote on that, I remember, that day in the room, and we said, do we believe Facebook's, claim that this was an honest mistake? And the entire room said, no, we don't believe that that this was an accident. Remember this, Cal?
We had zero.
Right. No,
zero.
Nobody believed Facebook. Everybody said they're lying. And then Michelle joined the conversation and explained. And then we were like, uh-oh, we feel bad. The insider actually knows what's really going on from inside the company. And
we should have done a poll just after that. And then Michelle would have been got a medal for her amazing media training communication, but also convincing.
Yeah.
But I think it was Greg that pointed out that if it was an accidental removal or delete, then they should have the capabilities to reverse it. So why didn't they?
Yeah, well, they did in the case of Facebook with the Resign Modi. The recent one unfolding at this very moment is the Twitter and Instagram. Where did it go here? I just lost it. Instagram and Twitter apologize for deleting pro-Palestinian posts, blaming the technical errors, but critics say their discriminatory algorithms are to blame. So the critics are saying, yeah, your algorithms are to blame. And this is being reported by Reuters, Vice, RT out of Russia, AP, Gizmodo, and the Washington Post. I'm reading the Reuters one, which I'll tweet out here shortly. Instagram, Twitter blame glitches for deleting Palestinian posts coming out of Beirut. Instagram and Twitter have blamed technical errors for deleting posts mentioning the possible eviction of Palestinians from eastern Jerusalem, but data rights groups fear that discriminatory algorithms are at work and want greater transparency. Getting into on Instagram, it was mostly content takedown. Even archives from older stories were deleted. Now that's where it gets interesting. If they go back even before, that's where you start to think it's not algorithmic at that point, of course. On Twitter, most cases were in account suspensions, according to an advocacy advisor. And Instagram and Twitter said the accounts were suspended in error by automated systems, and the issue had been resolved and content reinstored. Instagram said in a statement that the automated update last week caused content reshared by multiple users to appear as missing. And then their quote is, "We are sorry this happened, especially to those in Colombia, East Jerusalem, and indigenous communities who felt this was an intentional suppression of their voices and their stories. That was not our intent whatsoever," Instagram said. And then there's the calls for clarity and more transparency, because when these situations happen, as it did in India, as is happening now in Jerusalem, people understandably feel like there's They're being silenced due to big tech, and it turns into a huge mess. And but thank God for Michelle again, who tipped us off as to the insider perspective from the company's side, that they do have hundreds of countries that they monitor in real time that are partly algorithmic, and mistakes do happen. And when they notice them, they reinstate the content and apologize, as Instagram and Twitter are now doing. So it's an interesting dynamic that hopefully people get more familiar with. And I felt like it's important because the whole room, even this intelligent room here at Tech News Around the World, even thought Facebook was lying when the press PR release came out. And probably the people reading this Instagram press release think that Instagram's lying, that it was not an honest mistake. Yeah.
Tyler, by the way, they are lying. So they've openly admitted in many congressional hearings how they algorithmic alter news. The censorship is quite well documented. It's nothing new. Twitter has been doing it openly since 2009 even. So none of this stuff is new. In fact, the journalists are the biggest people calling for censorship because they like to be the gatekeepers to information. And so they've even wanted, places like Clubhouse to enforce censorship. So it's nothing new.
I gotcha.
This music is going to be my caller tune one day.
It's going to what?
It's going to be my caller tune one day.
My caller tune. Oh, your caller ID song. Okay. On this topic, actually, Leon, appropriate that you should jump in. And I like the headline that you're just DM'd, which fits right into this conversation. Go ahead and share this one from your favorite publication, the South China Morning Post.
Sure. So it's as you know, probably you don't know, China just did like their decades. Every decade they're gonna put a census about how many people they have over there.
No, we very much do know. We went into that very deeply in the previous time zone, and I think in this time zone yesterday. Yeah,
I see.
But we should because your article is related to that. Let's just do a 1 minute recap. Essentially, China just released some census data around the birth rates, which has a lot of people talking because the birth rates are quite low and maybe lower than many expected, and which means that the average age in China is now older than the average age of the average American. And there's a lot of interesting techno-political, anthropological ramifications that could come from this. And now Leon has a new headline to share from South China Morning Post. Go ahead, which I will share from the Tech News Twitter account. Go ahead, Leon.
Yeah, so this is actually really bad news for the long term because as we know, we are entering this knowledge economics in the future, economy in the future. So the most important asset one, let's say, China company would have is people, young people. That's something they don't have in the future. What happens because of pressure, you heard a lot about, sometimes the Chinese are proud of their work to their bone. Well, there's a price you have to pay. That means you don't make a baby. You don't have to make baby. That's one thing. Another thing is that the price, living cost in Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong, also probably Shenzhen, Canton, are so high. Young people, most of them actually were not born in the city, so they did not have an apartment. They don't have an apartment. So they just could not settle down. That means that the living cost for them is so high, so they just cannot have a family. Even they do have a family, they're married, they just cannot afford to have their kids. That's a big problem. That's pretty much the piece of South China Morning Post really emphasized. That's real bad.
Yeah, let me read the headline. It says, China's population outlook worrying as young people balk at the high cost of having kids, which they are, because they're, as David, by the way, on stage, did a fantastic deep dive into this topic with Justin in a room about 12 hours ago. And then the headline continues, China's aging population is the least of concerns for young people who can barely afford to make ends meet, much less have children. Huge income to debt ratio said to be most effective contraceptive for millennials and Generation Z. You could probably add in technology and smartphones and even VR into that mix as well as a very form of effective contraceptive. But the interesting points that David and Justin raised in their political discussion room earlier was that essentially China now wants young families to start having more kids because this becomes a very difficult problem economically to manage if your population continues to age and you have an inverted demographic pyramid where it becomes very top heavy and the bottom becomes smaller. It's hard to keep that balanced. And this is happening. This is not unique to China by any means. We're talking about China because the data for China just came out, 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago. But the point is that now China wants to encourage the young families to have more kids. And that's a difficult situation as China is now quickly urbanizing into the major cities, which David really got into in a brilliant way. And there's a lot of interesting, unobvious thoughts that get introduced into this conversation. For example, women were working, and if women now are by the states there's more of an expectation to have children, then employers stop perceiving women as potential employees because they know that the state is expecting them to have children, yada yada. So that's just one of many interesting points that were raised. David, any other comments you want to introduce onto that topic?
I was just going to say...
No, I think Tyler's pretty much covered it.
Yeah. Sal?
Both France and Italy were facing declining growth rates because of... And what France ended up doing was they started subsidizing childbirth. And in fact, they would even give medals, like the French president gave a medal of honor to a mother who gave birth to 9 children. And it's big, like they started like celebrating women giving birth, and not just with money and tax subsidies and cash, but also with like the society rewarding them with like things. So that's how France corrected it, but Italy didn't do much, and Italy has a aging demographic issue that like China does. So China will probably have to enforce some of these or put into place some of these measures to their declining birth rate.
Yeah. So, David, you had another really interesting article out of Manila while we're on the topic of Asia or the Philippines. Could you cover that?
Sure. I actually saw this earlier today when it was covered in the largest Chinese financial news. And then so I went to look for the original English publication. And this is directly from the Filipino government's news agency. So the Philippines just announced what they call a state of calamity because they've recently had to make the decision to wipe out $2 billion worth of pigs with the returning African swine flu. And this is especially important, I guess, in China to look at because we're just coming out of the African swine flu situation in China, only on a disease control level and not on an economic level. So in 2019, by the end, China had to wipe out about 250 million pigs. That's 1 in 4, every 4 pigs in the world, since China owns about half of the world's pig population.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. So that wiped out a little over $119 billion of worth of pigs for China. So obviously this has been kept on a very sort of down low because pork is considered what the state calls a strategic defense supply. Because it's the most important and most plentiful source of protein for most Chinese citizens. And so I think this will really put a light onto all of these new buzzy plant-based foods or plant-based meats that we're looking at now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does indeed. I want to thank you for that, David. And again, I recommend following David because he co-moderates and hosts rooms on all things around China. One of the most insightful people being based in Beijing there that we've seen here in Clubhouse. So one of my favorite new follows. And I want to turn it to, we did cover a lot of the political stuff. We covered the a bunch of China. You also mentioned in the earlier time zone about the Taiwanese stock market falling considerably. Can you just give like 30 seconds on that?
Sure. So Taiwan had the worst intraday fall in the stock market since 1969 today. And then a lot of the gains made in the past month is nearing a correction, right? So a correction in the stock market would be a 10% drop overall. So it's I think a 9.6% drop since the beginning of the year. And the reason why I guess that's quite significant, not only for this part of the world, but for the entire world, is Taiwan is now in the middle of this very heated U.S.-China sort of detente, if you will, being the largest manufacturer of semiconductor chips. So we're looking at a pretty strong, I guess, a few factors that are pretty worrying. So Taiwan has had the worst drought in years. And a lot of that drought and a lot of that water is very important for the manufacturing process of the semiconductor chips. And then on top of that, the reason why the stock market performed so badly for 3 days in a row is because the health ministry there has finally raised the COVID level after Taiwan has sort of kept it at bay so well for the past year and several months. So all these factors combined has taken a real toll on the stock market. And because it was performing so well before, I think investors were so over leveraged. So the massive drop off in the past 3 days has caused effectively a major sort of margin call on a lot of the leveraged up stock. So I think it's definitely something for us to keep an eye out for, given how important of a role all of these tech companies in Taiwan are now playing globally for the supply chain.
Yeah, thanks for that. I want to turn it to VR. Is Victoria on stage? Dave, you wanted to add something to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying because I'm originally I grew up in Taiwan, so I've been following this real closely. Is that most people probably have known that Taiwan did pretty well in terms of the COVID pandemic, but
indeed, yeah,
in the past 2 or 3 weeks they've had outbreaks due to I think right now the suspect is from pilots that was flying back to the country, and they kind of ignored certain restrictions that we're supposed to have. So now they're having community outbreaks where they're starting to having problems tracking the COVID source. So I mean, we'll see how that goes because last year they actually had a community outbreaks in one of the IC chip packaging facilities, and so I hope it doesn't go as bad as that this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was a real IC scare last year.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So Harry just sent.
Hey Tyler, can I do a?
What's up, Dan?
I have to run, but can I do a real quick plug?
Sure. For your upcoming room, yeah.
Yeah. So tomorrow at 9:00 Pacific time, which is actually during the time of this room, having climate scientist Kevin Anderson, who's one of my favorite climate scientists, who tells it like it is about the challenge of mitigating climate change and meeting 1.5 and 2 degree warming targets and what's really involved in that. So anyone who's interested in hearing how it is will be interested in listening to Kevin tomorrow on Climate Chat Club. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you, Dan. I've got a couple of other.
Make sure to calibrate your thermometers first.
Yeah, and they got the Asian economic news out of Japan. SoftBank reports highest ever annual profit for a Japanese company. Profit of nearly $46 billion puts Japanese tech investor in a league with companies such as Google and Microsoft. SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son shown smiling on stage in the photo here at SoftBank Group, which is one of the world's biggest investors in tech. Their chairman, Masayoshi Son, is one of the most interesting visionary folks I've ever had the pleasure to meet with, and it exceeds all expectations. Truly, some of the most wild conversations you will ever have is with this SoftBank's CEO, Masayoshi Son, often known as Masa or Son-san in Japan, and just a wild character who has a really 300-year vision, and he makes incredibly ambitious bets on this very long-term vision. And so it's not a surprise that he calls his fund the Vision Fund, if you get to know him at any length, where he's renowned for his very long-term and very high-risk vision. But he throws down on these big bets on very ambitious companies, and often sometimes loses. In the case of WeWork, that was quite an incredible gamble put on WeWork, which
and dog walking. Don't forget that.
There's a bunch, but net he's hard to. I would not often bet against him, and he has such an interesting role.
Yeah, I think last year he was saved by two very good IPO, one from a South Korean e-commerce giant, and then the other one from a food delivery in San Francisco.
Yeah, but he's also one of the biggest shareholders in Alibaba. And he, even though being a Korean in Japan, but he has such an incredible arm into China in a way that more than any non-Chinese person, I think David would agree. He's perhaps
SoftBank also runs India. Tyler.
In a very they have incredible strong reach into India as well, and Masa knows how to play Asia perhaps better than the Pan Asia, perhaps better than anybody. Truly fascinating figure. And so I'm going to tweet this article from the Tech News Around the World Twitter account, and thank you to Renjith in Stockholm who shared it with me. And that's how, by the way, just as a quick aside, how we love sharing these headlines. It makes it super easy. If you find a good headline that you think we should cover, please do tweet it and tag us. Our Twitter account is TNATW, which you can see by clicking on the title of this room, where you'll see the Tech News page, which we hope you follow the club and look at the other upcoming events, because there's many more events other than the Tech News Around the World, where we meet twice a day. You'll see we do MedTech and FinTech and VR Tech, etc. And the Twitter account becomes super important because we are constantly tweeting out these headlines that we're talking about, so you can read the articles yourself. And other people are tweeting at us, and it makes it very easy for us to retweet them to you. So it's become our new favorite way, rather than having people direct messaging us where nobody gets to see what you're sharing, and even I miss 90% of them. This way I get to see all of them, and with one click I can share them to everyone who follows the account. So it's this huge win-win, much more optimized system that we've just
now I know.
Yeah. So
you miss 90%.
Yeah. Well, I can't. I mean, people are DMing me 100 articles an hour, and it's doesn't work.
Yeah, too popular, we know.
But when you tweet them on Twitter, and you add the TNATW Twitter account to your tweet, I instantly see it because I'm tagged in it. I can retweet it in one click to everyone that's following, and then we can talk about it in real time. That's why I just retweeted your article, Cheryl. And Henry, thanks for Henry has an article also about TikTok owners ByteDance in a big battle with in China over TikTok owner ByteDance pursues a legal battle against Tencent, their big rival in China, after court rules that they have to pay $1.2 billion in damage, this being reported by the South China Morning Post. Beijing-based ByteDance said it will appeal a decision handed down by the Guangzhou Intellectual Property Court in April. The court ruled against ByteDance, ordering the firm to pay $1.2 million as compensation to Tencent for violating copyrights. But they're not going down without a fight, and so they're not going to fight that. So thank you for sharing that one to our Twitter account, Harry. And now I see a lot of people sending in a lot of good articles here. Like Heyman just sent in a really cool one about tech playing a growing role in the UK's domestic abuse cases, experts say. Instant retweet so everyone can see it. Thank you, Heyman. And let's talk about it. So go ahead and share it, Heyman.
I was relaxing here with a tea. I thought you were sharing it. So basically what they found was that people are using social media these days to harass, using alias accounts to harass their partners, friends, and so forth. So this is something that's been growing. And also we know that there's been an increase, and even in the physical world, there's been an increase in the use of domestic violence shelters to do this. So I'm not sure how they're going to actually go about this, but it's good that they're pointing this out, and hopefully tech people would actually take heed.
Yeah, as the headline says, tech playing growing role in UK domestic abuse cases, experts say. Certainly during COVID, complex cases involve perpetrators using multiple accounts and devices to abuse, control, and monitor partners. Domestic abuse cases requiring specialist support because technology has played a key role have soared over the last year, as I said, during COVID. The largest specialist provider of domestic abuse investigation services in England and Wales has warned complex tech abuse cases involve perpetrators using multiple accounts and devices to abuse, control, and monitor their partners using a range of tech as well as sophisticated malicious software. And this is why you had to do that deep dive on those new Apple AirTags, because that adds a whole new 4D dimension to the equation of tracking partners in a quite potentially concerning way. This
and also a note, Tyler, that I'm speaking with a few people on Clubhouse. They actually have been victims of domestic abuse, and if you notice that they don't actually like to have social media accounts, so you have to communicate with them through other means. So don't force anyone to get on Twitter or etc. sometimes, because they actually have reasons for why they don't want to be, because of harassment.
Yep. And David, you just shared a great one about TSMC joins U.S. chip coalition in potential blow to China. Please share that one.
Yeah, so the news just came out less than an hour ago, actually. So this is huge. TSMC just joined 70 U.S. and Asian companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Intel, and then TSMC MediaTek from Taiwan, Samsung Electronics, and SK Hynix from South Korea, and then Holland's ASML, which is the only supplier of the advanced photolithography equipment. So I think this will be huge, since they're all part of what's now the coalition, the lobbying coalition that is in response to President Biden's Chips for America Act. So really creating more of a buffer for China to wean off its dependency on U.S.-led coalition of the entire supply chain, and then putting more of that production and know-how within U.S. borders. And part of that will be funded by the U.S.'s new $50 billion fund for this industry.
I think we should give sweetheart deals to these big companies with very poor companies with no cash on hand. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they structure it. If they do put in money, I don't think it should be a sweetheart loan. It should be a direct equity investment with upside as well, because none of these companies are poor at all. They have billions. They have collectively probably close to $1 trillion of cash on hand. So there's no justification for this sweetheart deal unless the government gets an upside from the investment.
Well,
But there are other ways they can do that, right? Expatriating tax. There are other ways that also, government can tap into that if they really want to get innovative.
I think the difficulty in this area isn't spending $50 billion today and then expecting results tomorrow. And that's really why this is one of the industries that China has had such a hard time in catching up with its counterparts in Taiwan, Korea, US, and Holland, because it's taken them decades to come as far as they have. So there is no band-aid quick payment solution to get this business set up. So as wealthy as these companies are, it does take decades to create an entire sort of value chain around the main companies. I mean, TSMC's peripheral businesses and upstream, downstream businesses actually account for nearly 25% of all of Taiwan's economy. So building out something like this.
I'm not disagreeing with that. That part is obvious. I'm just saying is if they want government handouts and none of these companies are poor and there's millions of people that are homeless, then the government, if it does it, should structure it as like an equity deal, not just a sweetheart loan, but it should get upside, and there should be upside to the government giving money away. That's taxpayers' money. That's all I'm saying. It should just be structured like a VC deal or a private equity deal, and that's it.
Yeah. I'm got a whole bunch of people. The audience is clearly getting the message now. My DMs have stopped, which is shocking for the first time in weeks of doing this. And now,
quick, get in with your DM.
Yeah,
everyone, get in with your DM.
No, but now everyone's tweeting to the Twitter account, which is great. I love
Perfect
this.
Answer.
So much better way to do this, because now everyone can see if they want to see what everyone's tweeting at me. Leon has one about EdTech, the big EdTech company in China called Meituan. Shrinks by $15 billion.
No, sorry, actually.
Yeah.
No, the headline was mixed up a little bit. It's two stories in one article. First of all, the two leading edtech company were fined by the government, so they get a big slap on their face.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is Meituan. Meituan is this, I believe, is kind of a online shopping
food delivery
company.
Yeah,
food delivery. It's the biggest food delivery giant in China, and their stock price dropped almost 10%.
Wow.
This morning, wipe off 16 billion market cap, US dollar market cap. Didn't say really much why is that. Actually, they said that because of the
So Meituan
co-founder
is
Wang
like
Xin.
Meituan is like the combination of Yelp and Grubhub. So both food delivery and the largest like Yelp like platform, and it's because they're now under antitrust investigation, on top of which the Chinese government wants to grab hold of their data. So in addition to those two services, they're also getting into the ride sharing service. So they now have the third largest like basically Uber-like platform, and they also bought out Mobike, which is the largest bike sharing platform in China.
I love it, man. David, you're an endless font of information. Now you're breaking news here all the time. It's great. Go ahead, Leon.
So you say going forward, you should rely on David for the tech news. Just ask me for like a biotech and healthcare from China.
Yeah, now we can diversify our Chinese tech coverage. Exactly.
Yeah.
We
So
love
if you want
both David and
you need some
Leon.
feisty story, David, you can also hand over to me because I have a thick skin, as you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Meituan, the funny thing about the article said that the reason why they get special attention from the government because the co-founder Wang Xin posted a Tang Dynasty poem on the Fanfo social media platform, criticized the book burning, which is an indirect way calling like the government that you have put too much restriction on the freedom of speech. And obviously, government didn't like that. Even he deleted the post. But afterwards, the government just opened an investigation into Meituan on April 26th for antitrust violation and torpedoed the fintech firm and group, whatever whatsoever. So, as a CEO in China, you have to be very careful. Just don't do something the government doesn't like. I guess that's a message.
Yeah.
From Bloomberg. I don't know whether that's the case or not. David, probably have a more color you can add to this. This is what I read from this article.
I mean, I think this is really just the new wave right now, just cracking down on all big tech, right? I think she saw what big tech can do in America, and he's like, well, shit, it's time for me to crack down on you guys before you guys pull what Twitter pulled on Trump to me. So
That's a very
everybody is under the gun right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. We need to be careful as well.
Yeah, even as Leon is saying, it's surprising to see. I mean, this is going on globally at the moment. This is the U.S. is Apple and Google are in this massive antitrust case in the U.S., which I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. And then similarly in Europe, you've got the big tech companies facing kind of EU Commission heat in Europe on similar kind of points. And then you've got the Chinese big tech companies in China. But the interesting difference is in China, it just goes so much faster, where the government's handing out billion-dollar fines every other day now, and they're going to have this all wrapped up in a couple of weeks, where these things are going to drag on for months and not years in the US and in Europe. Yeah.
Well, Tyler, can I make a comment?
Yeah, please do.
So going back to the tech and antitrust and freedom of speech. So looking at the history of the development of freedom of speech laws over the US over the past, I don't know, a few hundred years, there's always a distinction between private speech and public speech. In other words, if you're a private citizen, there are certain standards that you need to follow, which is a lot different from a government makes a particular speech or characterization of someone. And again, to put a long story short, concerning what we've been talking about today, regarding the Alina Khan's appointment and her thesis that Yale note on antitrust theory in terms of looking at a broader scope, expansive view of the standards with which we should evaluate antitrust cases. And I thought something else that's going to be relevant, I think I'm sort of predicting this if it's not already happening, which is on the freedom of speech standards, looking at how these big tech companies are actually, even though they are private citizens, if you will, corporate citizens, but in fact, the size and the ability of reaching to the public, and the fact that the government officials, like our former president, was using these private platform to generate public messages announcing firing, hiring, or political messages. I think those of us who are in the legal field or in the tech field should pay attention to whether going forward there will be a new round of evaluating standards of speech and looking from an antitrust angle, whether these big tech companies will be viewed as the railways, the oil producers in the 1800s, that it needs to be perhaps, and I'm not saying nationalized, but there will probably not be let alone to operate like mom and pop, restaurants, private citizens, if you will, and that has impact on technology, the intersection between technology and the law. Another angle to look at this is when AI comes into play. Another round of evaluation would need to be paid attention to.
Yeah.
I think the courts would have to grapple with these issues. And the last thing I want to say, Tyler, you're saying you're comparing the Chinese antitrust actions with $1 billion of fines and how quick and fast and fierce that is versus, the U.S. DOJ, doing investigation takes a long time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that the U.S. way of approaching can be even more serious or damaging. I mean, finding money is probably, I hate to say this, but probably the least of concerns for a company like Alibaba. And if you look at the dollar amount, it was really just, I don't know, 4% of the revenue or something. But what the U.S. is doing, it could be fundamentally structural changes, like what the government has been doing to Microsoft in the 80s or 90s, and then IBM and Marvell in the olden days.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to watch for.
Indeed.
I'm Ben. I'm done speaking.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Hey, Tyler,
Ben,
if I may add,
yeah.
Go ahead, Saul. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is first of all, the myth about freedom of speech, it doesn't really exist. Eugene Debs was arrested he was a politician during World War One, openly speaking against entering the war. He was arrested and the Supreme Court said he has no freedom of speech. It's a court case, you can look it up. The director of Spirit of 76, once again, during the era of World War One, Robert Goldstein, he was arrested and jailed as well for doing a movie that was anti-British when the U.S. was allied with Britain. And then coming back to like CEOs being jailed, they arrested the CEO of Qwest, a telecommunications company, Joseph Nacho, for not complying with the illegal orders of the George W. Bush administration, because he refused to give up call data on millions of American citizens when Verizon and AT&T and the others did it illegally. So the issue is freedom of reach versus freedom of speech. Your freedom of speech is limited when you have a very large freedom of reach. So that's always the seesaw. So
Sal, I just want to echo quickly, not to get into the individual cases that you've raised. The point is the structure of the freedom of speech laws in the U.S. and how courts view it versus the individual application of the doctrines of this freedom of speech. For example, we all know you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. That's an example of showing, yes, there may be individual application of the particular cases under the doctrine of freedom of speech. But my point was based on, I think fundamentally, because of the technology again, we're a tech newsroom, based on what's been happening for the past 20 years. The laws, the existing laws and the rules in the US have been developed over the past 200 years. And I think this is sort of a pat on the back for those of us who are in technology. I think the technology development for the past 20 years has not been incremental changes. It could be fundamentally a framework to change how the laws are structured, how the doctrines is going to be evaluated.
Yeah,
that's my point.
Thanks for that. Charles, are you clapping or you want to jump in?
Oh, I mean, yeah, marking the 6-year anniversary of my lifetime ban
from
from
Twitter.
Twitter from
It's
2015
today the
for
anniversary.
warning
Happy
about.
Twitter banning anniversary, Charles.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For warning about the use of Twitter to destabilize American cities, and now we're learning the role of crowdfunding of various, countries sending money to January 6 rioters or to Black Lives Matter rioters. And so I think what we're going to increasingly see, and one could also think, Substack is useful insofar as it sort of undercuts some of the power of institutional gatekeepers, but it's also a great way to send money and launder money if you're trying to prop up certain voices, if you're a foreign government, say. And so I think one of the problems of the moment we're in is that we have all these discussions about freedoms and rights and those sorts of things, but we don't oftentimes talk about responsibilities that tech companies and others have to sort of make the world actually a better place rather than just enrich themselves. And so I think, when I invest in tech companies, I oftentimes ask entrepreneurs, or when I hire people, sure, like you have all these rights to build these kind of things, but should you? And what duties are you fulfilling? How are you making our society better for the average person in the development of this technology?
Yeah.
And when they can't answer that question, or they sort of demur or push back against it, I run for the hills.
There you go. I want to welcome Karen back to the stage, who is one of our new fantastic brainiacs to join this ever-growing brain trust, and covering a much-needed expertise area of robotics, working as doing robotics with SoftBank. And Karen, I don't know if you were in the audience. We just shared a headline that SoftBank had a tremendous financial quarter, kind of blowing everybody's minds, as Masa is known for doing. But any robotics news that you're aware of or that you've been tracking in the past day or two?
Hey Tyler, thanks for welcoming me in. I really do enjoy these rooms. I just joined like a couple of minutes ago, so I
Okay.
missed
Oh,
the
that's right.
headline.
I saw you jump in, and I instantly threw you on stage out of my
Yeah, but
eagerness. Yeah,
no worries.
yeah, no worries.
For the day, I don't really have any robotics news. But I promise I'll be back with
Yeah,
some as
but
soon as I hear
but
anything. Thanks.
I will take the opportunity to point out that one of the most interesting people to follow in Clubhouse, if you have an interest in robotics, as I do, as many of the people on stage do, and it's great to have you back here on stage.
Thank
I'm seeing Cheryl, you're
No,
sharing. Yep, you're
we
sharing a
have
headline
to.
from TSMC that sales are down for
No,
March.
I just
Yeah.
want to congrats Karen first. Maybe she's gonna expect a big bonus from SoftBank.
Oh, right. Yeah, because they had a fantastic quarter. Yeah, maybe she will get a nice little bonus if they do that on a company basis where they profit share or whatever. Let's get into a few more headlines. We have thus far done politics, green tech, China quite extensively. There's a really interesting crypto headline we can get into, which is eBay is now doing NFTs. It's as simple as that. The details are that they they require that, of course, that you register your items on the Wax platform, and you have a Wax wallet to receive your NFTs. But these NFTs are done in a traditional eBay way of kind of cash bidding. These are not Ethereum kind of auctions. These are cash auctions, just as eBay normally does. And the virtual item that you win, because NFTs are virtual items essentially, you need a particular wallet to receive your virtual items, of course, and that all makes sense. And it's an interesting sign that these NFTs are now reaching more of a mainstream platforms like eBay. It'll be interesting to see if we get NFTs on Amazon, and then other people
And
have.
also,
Yeah, go ahead.
and also, Tyler, eBay just also today announced that they're going to be launching a small business loan services to 300,000 SME sellers. So to compete with PayPal and the other guys in the space.
Yeah. And then there's no shortage of headlines here as well. Going back into fintech for a second, Better.com is an online mortgage provider, which is doing an IPO through a SPAC. And that is something to watch closely, as it's one of the important kind of bedrocks of banking is, providing mortgages. And now AI-driven startups can do that more efficiently And I highlighted in our European time zone that I had a startup on stage at my event recently that was launching on stage, and they revealed for the first time ever, with journalists watching, a 1 minute real-time mortgage application and approval, all in less than 60 seconds. And it was an authentic audience member. There was thousands of people in the audience, and the pitch was one of my favorite memorable pitches, where this founder said, who wants to apply for a mortgage in the next 30 days? And a whole bunch of 100 people out of the thousands in the audience raised their hand. Okay, come up on stage. Person in the front row, they jumped on stage, applied for the mortgage on the app, and was approved in less than 60 seconds for the mortgage. And that's what's coming, because it's very data, AI, metric driven, in a way that banks are going to find very difficult to compete with. And that's going to have interesting implications for banks and for fintech startups who adopt this, because other fintechs could add this to the growing bases that the neobanks, like Mondo and N26 and Revolut, etc., could certainly add this to their portfolio of features that they offer as neobanks, right? So it could be a very interesting space to watch, and the banks need to take note.
Another fintech news, if you want.
What's that?
Thanks, Sarah. Remitly lands investment from Visa amid reports of IPO preparation. So the Seattle-based mobile remittance setup, Remitly, landed an undisclosed equity investment from Visa. The companies previously partnered in 2019 and have extended their partnership. Visa cited that the deal is its earnings call last month, and the investment comes as Remitly is reportedly preparing to go public. Total funding to date in the 10-year-old company prior to Visa investment was nearly 400 million, including a 85 million Series F round raised in July. So Remitly's mobile technology lets people send and receive money across borders.
Yeah.
And the company is ranked number 3 on the GigWire 200 list of top Pacific Northwest tech startups.
Yeah, remittances is also a huge fintech space that many people are getting into, and the tech companies can do it much better. And notably, the blockchain companies can do this much better. There's much less fees involved. TransferWise is kind of the biggest player in this space out of Europe. Originally out of Estonia, based in London, and props to the Estonia mafia tech geeks who might be listening. And TransferWise has really proven the market and shown just how inefficient the legacy players, how big of a dinosaurs they had become. Western Union comes to mind most readily, but they've opened a Pandora's box now with kind of the blockchain ability to do this. And we had a lady, Milliam, who joined us on stage yesterday, who's doing precisely this in the Caribbean. And she highlighted just how big this is, in Latin America and Mexico specifically. And we even looked into some of the details of the numbers. And Cal, correct my memory here. It turns out India, net in terms of actual numbers, aggregate numbers, India is the biggest remittance.
80 billion, right? India was at about 80 billion.
80 billion per year. And it was about 3% of India's GDP. And then you had Mexico, where it's an even bigger percentage of GDP, but a smaller net number. But it's a huge, huge space that these companies, these blockchain companies, could get into. So keep an eye on.
It's a $700 billion industry. Remittance, the global remittance.
Yeah, if you add them all up.
And Tyler,
Yes, David.
Tyler, I should mention that.
Go ahead. Oh, Mabwana, sorry, you sound like David. Go ahead. Mabwana, you there?
Or was it David?
Don't forget Africa, because although it's not as big as a corridor as Mexico, Philippines, and India, we do have the highest cost.
Right.
So you're seeing you're seeing Western Union, and a bunch of others, MoneyGram, charging outrageous rates, like 10-15%. And so the opportunity to compete and actually make an impact, it's actually hugely important. there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, we absolutely shouldn't. Africa is key to this whole thing, and I think that's why they're in a way slightly leapfrogging, because they're sensitive to the rates that apply to these remittances. Right, it has a potentially bigger impact in some sense, so they're really going to optimize.
And just great for startups, right? Mbwana,
Totally.
that's what you're saying. Like margins
Totally.
are, if you can, it's just such a wonderful place to innovate on.
Yeah.
With the large margins in Africa.
Yeah, and then that plays to the strength of startups who inherently have much lower margins to deal with, lower overhead, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they get, they're able to.
I'll challenge you, Tyler, a little bit on the blockchain being the best. I think blockchain is an efficient method, but in my experience, I've seen a lot of startups try and attack this space with blockchain. For example, BitPesa has tried, and they've moved towards business remittance than individual. I would say that in a lot of countries, you have a lot strong resistance from incumbents, but also I should mention many countries don't have functioning ID systems, right? So KYC, money laundering, is very, very important here. So being able to move money from A to B and securely know that it's not going to a terrorist, is extremely, extremely important in Africa when you have a lack of infrastructure of IDs. So actually, my thesis in this space is build the rails. For example, invested in the ID systems, like using selfies and ways to biometrically authenticate people. That's more important now before you open the floodgates to money pouring in super seamlessly. But yeah, if you can, anyone who's doing that, I think is well positioned to capitalize. But yeah, I would challenge that it's just just the blockchain is all you need. I think you still need some of the rails and working with governments.
I think I saw a news that not news but an old article that Philippines has probably worked around it using a blockchain for those people who initially have no access to bank. So maybe I will check on more articles and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, but I want to highlight. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. I want to highlight Mbwana's cultural context that you're adding there, which is not obvious to people outside, but that's why we do this room, man. That is brilliant on the ground insight that we don't have. So it's critical that we have you at the table to share that. I love that, and of course, thank you for challenging me on that. It's super, super valid input.
Hey Tyler, quick 30 seconds.
Sure, David.
Another news is China just for the first time ever today launched the first NFT auction sales through the third largest auction house, Yongle, and we were one of the two galleries to do it with them. So yeah, so shameless plug-in. Sorry.
1 Bitcoin to the fund, David. But it sounds like it has
He said no problem. It's coming in.
He said no problem. Well, he deals in Bitcoin mining, so
congrats, David.
Yeah, congrats. So I imagine this is in some way inspired by the Christie's auction of the NFTs.
Definitely. So another shameless plug-in. So we're doing it with the biggest auction house, Poly, next month. But obviously the difference is the Chinese government requires us to do all transactions in RMB in China.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to keep us updated on that. I imagine we'll be seeing headlines about it, but you feel free to bring them in and share them as they're related to your own project. Willie just shared an interesting article with us on Twitter that I retweeted from the Twitter Tech News Around the World Twitter account, TNATW. 1/5 of all EV buyers go back to gas vehicles, mainly because of charging issues. Researchers at Cornell University have developed tech for vehicles to be charged on the road while in motion. And you can see the details of that from the Tech News Around the World Twitter account. What a great find, Willie. Thank you for sharing that. And we talked about that, I think, yesterday, where it was actually Stella who rejoined us after being gone for several days, who works in the oil world out of Switzerland, all originally from Russia. And she highlighted the fact that, the dependability of gas stations is difficult to beat. And
Tyler, sorry for the interruption. Hasn't the Autobahn been doing that for a while now on one of its lanes?
I don't know. Willie might know. He's in Germany.
The Autobahn, I remember a couple of years ago, was developing a lane on it just for that purpose.
Okay, well, Willie, raise your hand and we can get your ground insight. Here he is. And due to the magic of Clubhouse, welcome, Willie, to Tech News Around the World. What's going on with the Autobahn and this? Is that where they're doing this this charging of vehicles on the road? Is that happening in Germany?
I don't know what this Autobahn thing means, but I remember that in Sweden, they are trying for the trucks to have a line above the trucks, above, not in the road. That's very different, and it's very costly anyway. So we will have to see whether this really works.
Yeah, they're trying to do a couple of different EV charging while in motion projects in Sweden for long haul trucks, because Sweden is such a very long, straight country, much longer than you assume. It would go from the length of Europe, top to bottom, essentially, if you moved Sweden down across kind of the center of Europe. And, those super incredibly long, thousands of kilometers of perfectly straight roads makes it easy to test out some of these kinds of things, right? So it'll be interesting to see. But thank you again for the article. I just tweeted it out so everyone can take a look at that. And
Tyler, I think Faraz is right. I remember from maybe about a year ago an episode of Top Gear from Germany showing the truck lane on an autobahn, which basically had a truck with an arm up to an overhead cable. Basically, that's how it was working. I don't know if it extended to cars, but it was running for trucks.
And that's the Swedish thing, I think, too. And of course, for trucks, it makes a lot of sense because they need much more fuel, so to speak, and so it's hard to have this charging problem for trucks in the future. But this news is about just the cars, and maybe they will install it first in the urban areas where it is cost effective. But I've not really read the original article. Sorry for that. Thank you for bringing me up.
Yeah,
Tyler.
of course, Willie. It's good to see you back. And thank you for sharing that article. I just shared it to the Twitter account. Great article. Professor Asif, who many people know around Twitter, if you ever get into a coronavirus conversation, shared a really fantastic article that I just retweeted out about the world's most vaccinated nation is spooked by a COVID-19 spike. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why would the world's most vaccinated nation be spooked about a COVID spike? The Seychelles has seen a surge in goddamn that journalist, whoever did that. That's an intentional tongue twister that they threw in there. Seychelles has seen a surge in coronavirus cases. Oh my God!
By the seashore.
Yes, what
funny.
What a beautifully, obviously intentional tongue twister that was thrown into a headline. Since the Seychelles has seen a surge in coronavirus cases, despite much of its population being inoculated with China's Sinopharm vaccine. And this is the New York Times. Dig into it yourself. I'll just give you a little glimpse here. The world's most vaccinated nation is spooked by a COVID spike. Seychelles has seen a surge in coronavirus cases despite much of its population. It's a typical New York Times story where they start off with a story of a lady and named a 30-year-old woman named Marie, and it's a very done in a story format. So it's enjoy that New York Times story, if you will. Thank you for the share, Professor Asif. A very good share. And let's see what else we got. I've got some other articles I wanted to touch on before. There's this new smart home alliance of gadgets. Thankfully, Google, Apple, and Amazon are all uniting along with driving a unification effort, which is now fully underway, to share hardware so that all smart home hardware manufacturers will now use the same kind of underlying technologies. So regardless if you are using the Google platform of Google Assistant and Google Home, or Alexa, or Apple's Siri and Apple HomeKit, as they call it. Thank you, Michael. That now all light bulbs, Philips Hues, etc., and cameras from Ring or from Logitech will all now auto-magically work in the future of the smart home due to this Smart Home Alliance. Well done, big tech. You crafty wizards that you are. You finally made the smart home future a realistic possibility, and we can all now buy these products. And I think the real winner is the end consumer in that. But that's a really noteworthy headline. So if you were going to buy something this weekend, you might want to wait until there's going to be a new logo to recognize all of the devices that fit under this new platform. And we tweeted it from the Twitter account earlier today. And they're claiming that this unification effort will become more, and the logo that goes along with it. Once you see the logo, you'll recognize it. It looks like 3 arrows pointing at each other, essentially, and they claim that this will become ubiquitous, much like the Wi-Fi logo has become ubiquitous across all the different Wi-Fi providers. Wi-Fi just works regardless of what company is using the server, the router, etc. Michael, you wanted to jump in?
Oh no, it's fantastic that these things are going to be working natively now, and I think that I found it interesting that Apple didn't necessarily they don't necessarily have, like, they're a part of the coalition, but they don't necessarily have anything lined up just yet. I know that it's going to start in the second half of 2021. But it was interesting. A number of my friends, when that headline went up yesterday, a number of my friends texted me and said, did you notice that Apple hasn't really they haven't announced anything that's going to be working with this, even though they're a part of it yet? And I was like, yeah, I noticed, because they did that as well with the whole wireless charging thing, where they were a part of it, but they didn't necessarily.
Oh, the Qi, yeah.
Yeah, like they were part of it, but they didn't necessarily announce or even say when they would start integrating it into their product. So but it will be helpful, because my house runs on HomeKit, and I would love to be able to not worry about which of these things I'm bringing into the ecosystem, and just know that I can grab it and plug and play. And really, that's the end game, isn't it? That's kind of where we would like all of this to eventually end up.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just glad to see this announcement, this headline. It's that the end consumer is the real winner, and actually, I think everyone wins in the end once they all agree on a standard like this. Forcing users to pick, Apple's ecosystem. Actually, I think Apple might be the big winner in this, honestly, because it seemed like Google was the one that was had the biggest market share of doing partnerships with all of the hardware manufacturers. So yeah, I think it's actually quite good for Apple. And so thank you,
Tyler.
Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to share a resource that I read earlier regarding those smart devices.
Go ahead, JT.
So Amazon's, this is JT. So Amazon's Echo Show has a new feature that allows you to view augmented reality, such as virtual backgrounds. You could also add like video and audio reactions or animation, but it also has like this wide angle camera that moves around your positioning. So it's like virtual panning and tilting. So it tracks your movements as you look at the camera, which is kind of spooky. I already have enough troubles knowing that Amazon Alexa, is listening to me, but now that it's going to be tracking my movement, that's a little bit more worrying. But also it supports Zoom calls, what I thought was interesting. Knowing that it's integrating augmented reality is pretty cool, but a little late to the game. I recently read that Google just added augmented reality virtual backgrounds to its Google Chats. So interesting product, but I guess late to the game overall.
Yeah. An interesting article someone just shared in the Twitter account around mice with severe COVID symptoms could speed vaccine effort. A new rodent model of COVID-19 promises an easier and quicker way to test treatments and vaccines, which is great because it's all about, with the mRNA development of vaccines, we've essentially been able to create vaccines in a matter of hours now to a virus, which is groundbreaking and earth-shaking. But you still have to go through all of the testing to make sure people don't get cancer from your new vaccine. And that takes a lot of time. And that's why it still takes a long time to roll out, and test all of these vaccines. However, that's what this article is talking about from nature.com. So I'm going to give this a quick retweet so you can read it in depth if you wish. Thank you, Katerina, for this. And I'll just quickly share a couple of key notes here. Researchers have developed a new strain of COVID that triggers severe COVID symptoms in mice, and that allows them to very expeditiously do a lot of the testing in a much more expeditious way so that they can get through the testing phase, assumedly much quicker, if I understand the article correctly, which would be great because that means we can go from virus pandemic to, an mRNA generated vaccine in a matter of hours, and then fast track the testing so that we can get them into the arms of people much, much quicker. But Heyman, if you could look at that from the Twitter account and read that article and give me your take, that would be much appreciated. Or Professor Ossoff as well, to get kind of the, those of us on stage who have medical backgrounds could kind of do a personal deep dive on that and see if it stacks up. A couple other articles I wanted to share, and do feel free to keep them coming. YouTube is going head to head now with TikTok, but not in the way that you might think. YouTube, of course, started off as user generated content, and then they started focusing on long form content to compete with television. When you guys remember this thing called TV, it's this old technology that some of you might remember. Yeah, it was cool, wasn't it? I mean, there were these things called TV shows, and you would have to wait for them to come on, once a week, and
there would be like movies on them.
There would be movies, but if you had this one show that you liked, you would wait until Wednesday night at 10 p.m. to watch it. It was just truly wild.
Like once a week, it was crazy.
Once a week, yeah, it was really cool. And anyway, that's long gone, but due to YouTube in large part, and Netflix, of course, and that's because YouTube focused on killing TV and creating long-form content and onboarding, long-form content. Now they've kind of successfully done that. Their new focus is super short-form content, which is where TikTok is quite the dominant app of the moment, and YouTube wants to go into that market. So they've created a $100 million fund to attract these TikTok creators. And now the trivia question of the day is, if you were YouTube and you wanted to battle TikTok and you had a $100 million fund to give creators, where on the planet would you focus on giving out this $100 million?
India.
Time's up. Yes, Cal wins again with India, because India banned TikTok, and they are trying to find a replacement, which Carlos, who joins us each day, is funding himself. He's part of the team who's building that company. And so there's still an open seat to replace TikTok in India, where it was wildly popular before it was banned. And so YouTube understands that opportunity, of course, and so they're going headstrong into India with their $100 million fund to encourage Indian content creators to help make YouTube the TikTok replacement in India. So, but that's just one of 170 apps Chinese apps that were banned in India. And Clubhouse is another app where it's unclear what will happen in India. And there's
Tyler,
yes?
Can I make a quick interruption on the TikTok part?
Yes.
So if you remember, when this whole thing happened in the United Kingdom with the children,
yep,
I'd told you I'd come back with an answer on that.
Yep.
So one of the major shareholders reached out to the secret cloud for the UK, and what's being done around that particular event is the certain government officials of the United Kingdom have reached out, and they're taking all that data that was troublesome for the UK around the children, around the information from kids, and they're going to put that on the secret cloud. And what happens further to that is not to my knowledge. So just reporting back on that.
Thank you for that.
Hey Taylor, can I just
yes.
Since you are talking about India about banning the Chinese app, on the other hand, I shared an article with you with a tag. The India, I believe the government, the Indian envoy asked China to help stop price surging of COVID-19 supplies.
Yes,
it's quite funny, right?
Yeah. I just saw that article. Thank you for that, Leon.
Yeah. If you think about it, on one hand, the U.S. government kind of a ban exporting of the important ingredients to make COVID-19 medical, especially vaccine or something. That's what I read a few weeks back. Obviously, the Indian government cannot do anything to the U.S. government. And now they're asking Chinese government to stop price surging of a COVID-19 supply, which means they're still getting the supply from China.
Perhaps.
On the other hand,
so Leon,
maybe
China
not.
good, US bad.
Yeah.
Is that where we go
I'm
here?
not saying that. I'm not saying that.
No, but
so what's the implication?
We have to read the article because it's unclear from the article what they're really pointing out. It's not clear if they are taking COVID supplies from China. It says India.
They are.
Oh, is that what it says?
Too expensive.
Yeah.
That's just complaint too expensive, too little.
So
funny, right?
let me read a little bit of it here. So it says, India envoy asks China to help stop price surging of COVID-19 supplies. New Delhi's representatives in Hong Kong says soaring prices and cargo flight disruptions are slow arrivals of medical goods. Second wave of pandemic has India scrambling for oxygen containers and other basic supplies. India is calling on China to help stop surging prices and increase cargo flights to get urgently needed supplies. It says they're asking for help. Yeah. The article's a pay articles. So I don't have a subscription to South China Morning Post yet, so I have not able to go much further in the article. But it says they're asking for help.
I can send to you. It's another, but I can read the remaining part. So pretty much, just as the person, her name is, let me say, Priyanka Changhan. I guess it sounds like a government official based in Hong Kong. So I will quote her what she said. What I would like to say is that our expectation at this point is that the supply chain should remain open and product prices should remain stable.
Yeah,
that's a complaint. Chinese are doing like a price gouging.
Right.
At least Chinese are selling, right? At least it's better than Americans who don't want to sell at all. I guess from if your neighbor or your ally is suffering, even you want to make some bad money out of it, at least you are giving something, right?
Yeah.
Better than giving nothing.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Well, yeah. When you open the market wider, you get more competition and you discourage price gouging. Yeah. So it could be a smart tactic on their part.
Do you think in exchange, the Chinese government could ask Indian government, okay, you know what, I can stop the gouging the price. How about you put a TikTok back to India? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
It might be too. Right? It might be too late if YouTube has their $1 million to spend on the content creators.
It's okay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I trust my alum, Yimin Zhang, right? I said that he went to the same university as I did. I mean, this guy's pretty hardworking. He's smart. I guess even he's late in the game, just like what he did with the TikTok compared to a lot of apps before him. He was not the first, but he was the best. So you never know.
Yep. So a bunch of folks sharing a whole bunch of fantastic articles. I love this new format of doing this. Katerina has a few here.
That's the win of the day, isn't it? The Twitter account is the win of the day.
Yeah.
I just went through the whole thing.
Yeah, and
this is really cool.
It's super cool because now
I can hear the excitement in Tyler's voice.
Yep, because now my DMs,
He's released.
my DMs have been beautifully empty now for at least an hour for the first time in 2 months.
Better than Durian.
Yeah, so much. This is so much better.
All my Twitter feed, my friend just sent me an email, saying, I've stopped following you on Twitter because all your feed is all your new friends from this new place. Where are you?
Yeah.
Because all I'm tweeting is you guys.
So tell him it's a new Clubhouse.
Yeah. Katerina shares a really great article from Scientific America about the title is Saving the World Inspires More Female Founders. Leadership in tech industry continues to lack diverse voices, but new research suggests that a simple shift in recruitment messaging helps, and essentially that there is a notable lack of female founders in traditional tech, and very notably in crypto and in fintech, and in some particular niches. They are better represented in medtech, and especially so in green tech. And I noticed this in my conferences that I produce, where I have, different sessions on stage around AI and green tech and med tech and design and blah, blah, blah. And I noticed it was always difficult to get good female founders on stage on the fintech sessions. But when we went into green tech, it was hard to find good guy entrepreneurs on the green tech. It's like the women were so much more focused on these products and services that were aimed at, fixing the bigger problems in the world around hunger and food and poverty and water and electricity and etc. And then I noticed that was the big aha moment for me, that this is actually the best argument for why we should encourage women to get into tech, is because they're focusing on what I feel are the bigger, more important humanitarian issues. And that's why we need all the smart minds at the table to address these incredibly huge issues. We have enough dog walking apps and gaming apps and photo sharing apps. What we need are more water apps, because water is going to become a huge issue, far bigger than dog walking, honestly. And food's going to become a huge issue, far bigger than, photo sharing. So it's important that there is actually a strong case to make for why we need to encourage more diversity in tech, and that's a great example. So thank you for sharing that article, Katerina. And
Tyler?
yes,
Tyler.
Tyler, it's Mafalda here. I just wanted you to play the round of applause to yourself because women need more male allies like you. So thank you, Tyler.
Yeah.
Tyler, just quick add. There may be some truth to that.
And to reward women to get more children has, of course, big impact too. But I want to, what actually helped in France, it's not just rewarding women for giving children, is to increase daycare accessibility and make it cheaper and more governmental paid. Also for kids that are then in school, that they can stay in the afternoon and get lunch and get tutoring. So the woman wouldn't have this bad mother title anymore for going to work, and the kids getting still good education, that the mother doesn't have to be 100% involved. So I think those initiatives are very important also, especially now in the Chinese and other places, that the women stay at work, especially, with COVID now, a lot of women dropped off their jobs to take care of the kids because the schools were closed. So I think we need to emphasize this a lot to help with the schools. Thanks.
Yeah, you shared a bunch of good articles today, so thanks to you, Katerina. A really interesting battery one, and this researchers developing new virus detection technology. A new flu virus makes its first appearance in the U.S. on a restroom doorknob at an international airport in January. And this team found a new virus detection technology, which is very cool. So I'm sharing that one as well. But again, it's a med tech one, so I can't really dive deep. But hopefully, Heyman and Professor Asif and others can take a look. It's
and Dr. Danish just joined.
Oh, Dr.
Is this
Danish,
amazing?
welcome. Yeah,
isn't it amazing how it works?
Yeah, Dr. Danish, welcome back. I'm wondering any tech news headlines that you've seen in recent days that you want to share with the group?
Oh, I just came up to say hi. But,
okay, fair enough.
No news yet.
Okay,
let me scour and I'll
go ahead, do that. We'll circle back, and while you do that, I want to encourage folks to follow Dr. Dinesh, who happens to be one of the best medical minds here in Clubhouse and hosts some fantastic conversations. And so we've done a lot of politics today. We did green tech, we did China, Asia, crypto, fintech, smart homes, a bit of Africa and India. Yes, open floor.
Tyler.
Yeah.
It's your
hey Justin,
the needle in your side.
Yes,
Justin.
Welcome back.
No, I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to do that audience poll today or tomorrow for
your upcoming event
coming on. Yeah, he's coming on in the first week of June, so we're just batting down a date. But I thought you run such a great show and your audience is so phenomenal. We can do it tomorrow.
Let's do it tomorrow. At the top of the session. Because that's normally we do the polls near the start for strategic reasons. I'll reveal to you privately, and but let's do that tomorrow at the start of the session. Either the morning, either time zone is fine.
And let's give them a real cliffhanger so that everybody shows up right away.
Go ahead.
Tomorrow we're going to do a poll. We have one of the younger members of Congress coming on, and the poll is going to be. I agree. I got him to agree that he's going to do tech as the subject of the interview, and then the Q&A from the audience. And we're going to let you choose what the actual tech subject is between two options based on the polling that Tyler figures out. So just wanted to give everybody a little teaser there.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, Justin.
Similar to Dr. Danish on the medical front, Justin, as you've no doubt have heard in this room, is brilliant on the political issues on a whole other level, and hosts a lot the brilliant political discussions here in Clubhouse. So one of my highest recommendations there. And he was the person who did the room with David earlier around the China aging population data, which was one of the best rooms I've been in a while. You guys are fantastic.
Hey, Tyler?
Yeah.
Tyler, Yeah, go ahead.
Please. Go ahead, Monica.
Yes, Monica.
Tyler, did we have enough of India?
Well, there's never enough India, Monica. Come on.
Yep. Never enough of
Never enough India.
Okay, I have 2 unicorn news coming up. So whenever you have time.
What a surprise. Another unicorn in India?
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be announced this week, and it's going to be one of the unicorns which is leading the way in terms of merchant acquiring, which is creating new merchants with digital options in India. It's called Bharat Pay. Bharat stands for India, and Pay is the Pay spelt in our Indian language. And interestingly enough, it's got a Bollywood celebrity as one of its icons, and now it has the Indian cricket team. So everybody who sponsored the Indian cricket team seems to be going great places, or at least the cricket team is going great places. So it's expected to announce its Series D and become a unicorn this week. And also along the same lines, a unicorn last month, which is called Grow. Instead of a fintech buying a bank, India has set the way for fintechs to buy mutual fund houses. So a fintech in India, which became a unicorn, which is an investment platform, has just bought a mutual fund which manages for about 100 crores, which is about, I think, $70 million, and they are going to be managing this fund by themselves. Interesting things happening.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Monica. And it's fun to get the unicorn updates because you guys are cranking out unicorns at a breakneck pace there, which is, as I said, that's going to continue for years to come. And that's why I'm excited to get over there once COVID gets under control to wet my beak on this fantastic unicorn rain tsunami that you guys are dealing with. It's truly fantastic. Yeah.
Hey, Tyler, can I go back to news about COVID and the mouse news that you shared?
Maybe for 1 minute because we're moving on to other things, Ben. Go ahead.
Yeah, so now that I've seen their medical professionals here in this room, first of all, there's a huge difference between getting mouse data model settled to it's going to work in humans. And I went through that many years ago with some of the portfolios I worked on. But with the recent vaccine approval, the EUA, we've been able to get these vaccine to the market in literally a half or a third of the time that's normal to take for the FDA to approve. So I wonder whether anybody has looked into the whole process of whether there's any lessons we can learn of speeding up in the future drug and vaccination approval process. Because my understanding from the talking with the medical community is that the EUA does not necessarily mean that this vaccine is not reliable. There's corners being cut. There's less stringent data. There's still the same kind of statistical significance, sample size, and evaluation. It's just it's been speeding up. It's been sped up because the resources that are put in. So I really wanted to hear whether there's any lessons we can learn so we can apply from what we've learned with the EUA of vaccine for COVID. But in the future, we can do this sort of the new and improved approval process for the drugs without sacrificing the efficacy and the safety.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get there.
Can I just answer really quickly to Ben? Hi, Ben. This is Salvini, and my PhD has actually focused on early access, for pharmaceuticals. So how they go through the EAPs and the adaptive pathways processes in Europe. And I looked into oncology medicines and compared it to the COVID vaccines and how they are also being approved faster. And of course, the difference is how they look at the surrogate endpoints. There are definitely many factors that get considered, and certain things will, of course, be negated. But I would love to discuss it further. I don't really think this is the platform because it's not really tech, but I would love to discuss further about the kind of lessons I've looked into. I also have a co-authored paper that got published, and we kind of used in Sage, and we kind of used that also to look into the innovation rates based on these type of changes.
Yeah, that's great, Salvina. I think that it makes a huge difference in how we're going to get drug approved in the process in the future, and it really saves lives as well. And also the other point that's going to be relevant is that it's going to spread the message that the vaccine is not unsafe. There's a lot of vaccine hesitators in the US at least now because of the message, it's EUA, it's now real. So I think that to get that process, the message out to the public, it's going to even help spread the
But it's been
vaccination
real for
movement as
quite
well.
a while, right? The coalition, I mean, they've been there for quite a while, and it's mainly looking at unmet need, and that was why they took more liberty with the vaccine, or how they take liberty with certain cancer treatments, because there's nothing available on the market. And that's, you're really taking a risk benefit analysis when you're looking at these treatments and how they're going through all these programs.
Agreed. Thanks.
Yep.
Well, let's hook up. Let's connect.
Another thing I want to add is, so by the way, I'm also doing drug development. So my company actually have a COVID-19 drugs right now in a phase 1 clinical trial. I think the trial is actually right now is ongoing globally, including several sites in the United States. So go back to Ben, your comments about a lot of people have a hesitance of taking vaccine, especially in the United States. Honestly, to be honest, I'm probably a little bit pessimistic, very rare of me. Even they get a full approval, I don't think they're going to change many people's minds. Unfortunately, this anti-science, anti-vaccine mentality is pretty deep-rooted. It's not like, FDA give a full approval would, dramatically increase the acceptance of those vaccines. Unfortunately, that's just my 2 cents.
If I can add some, so this mouse model is also is supposed to be more used actually to find new treatment options and new drugs. I know AIs are going through all kinds of drugs. We have already FDA approved and just screen for all kinds of drugs which could possibly treat COVID. So I think, especially with the new strains coming up very fast, that will outpace probably our vaccination efforts in the future at some point. This mouse model is very important, so that we can try out better in animal models first, and not just in cell cultures, these drugs before putting them out into clinical trials. Because I also shared another paper showing that how we did clinical trials was very, very inefficient. We did worldwide hundreds of hydrochlorine and all these drugs that were repeated and repeated in humans, and in clinical trials in humans is very, very expensive, time consuming and inefficient. So we need to, for the future pandemics, to make these sort of research better and more efficient. So having a mouse model enables us to test it first, and mouse models breed fast, they are cheap to house, and so on and so forth. So this is a big step, I think.
Great. Thank you, Katerina. We're going to end it there because we're now 7 minutes over, and we were supposed to hand it over to our friends Ben and Donna, who are doing the midweek blockchain news, where we're all going to head over now. So please join us there. And thank you to everybody for joining us for Tech News Around the World. It's a sincere privilege and honor to do this with you guys each day, jumping into these headlines as we do, and looking forward to doing it with you again tomorrow. Check click on the title of the room to see the schedule, where we meet twice a day. Hopefully you can join us